A blinding flash of blue magic shatters the dark as a system window logs a brutal milestone, clearing the final stage of Inner Lunatic for the 27th time. The interface scrolls through an endless wall of text, tallying every suppressed resistance and conquered moon on his veteran profile. But for Yu-chan, these flawless gaming achievements don't mean a thing, because in the real world, he's scheduled to die next month. A memory from 2 years ago cuts deep. The cold voice of a doctor flashing a brain scan and warning him to brace for the worst. He recalls walking out of that massive hospital building, sitting on a concrete bench completely numb with his prognosis papers crumpled in his lap. The clinic visits blur together, every high-priced specialist delivering the exact same terminal death sentence. The medical staff didn't offer hope. They just handed over a heavy bottle of pain meds and told him to swallow them when the agony became unbearable. Now, Yu-chan leans heavily over his dark desk, catching a glimpse of his hollow reflection in complete isolation. He just stares blankly, swallowed up by the quiet emptiness of his room. A sudden, violent coughing fit leaves wet blood dripping straight through his fingers, a harsh physical reminder that his countdown is running out. His phone buzzes aggressively against the wood, drawing his gaze down to the glowing glass. It's an automated ping from the university hospital, locking in his final, grim examination appointment. He grips the plastic until his knuckles turn white, surrounded by a mess of hospice care flyers and late-stage cancer brochures. He tenses his jaw, staring into the dark with absolute fury at his broken body. Tears stream down his face, right as a digital system pop-up materializes in midair, mockingly asking if he wants to start a new game. He aggressively hits yes, typing in his old username for the very last time, Carl. He navigates through an advanced customization layout, glowing text illuminating the shadows of his room. He chooses the legendary trait, Mana Sensitivity Genius, and stacks it directly with Swordsmanship and Combat Genius. His eyes narrow as the screen flashes blood red, warning him that forcing 2 genius traits triggers catastrophic system penalties. The interface automatically locks in a permanent negative modifier to balance the build, terminally ill. He lets out a hollow laugh at the pitch-black irony. His digital avatar is now just as sick as he is in reality. With a steady finger, he slams confirm on the build, knowing he has absolutely nothing left to lose. Static crackles across the screen as his newly forged avatar locks its gaze directly onto him. Suddenly, a white-hot spike of agony tears through his chest, forcing a desperate gasp from his lungs as his heart gives out. The room goes dead black, right as a final, mocking system notification pings. Character. Creation. Successful. As his consciousness drifts, he tells himself he at least wanted to die on his own terms, while a digital synchronization meter climbs rapidly to 19%. His fingers twitch against heavy, unfamiliar silk bedsheets as his eyes fly open. Battered, exhausted, and waking up in a completely different world. He sits up and blinks against the bright light, realizing he is standing inside a massive, luxury room with wooden floors. He looks around in a panic and rushes over to a pair of nearby mirrors to inspect his reflection. His hands begin to shake violently as he realizes he has transmigrated into the single worst character in the game. He looks up at a giant chandelier and recognizes that this fantasy world is his definitive new reality. He drops into a thinking posture and resolves to organize his thoughts, to make sense of this hidden helper system message. The system interface flashes a direct promotional text instructing the player to join Eldine Academy. The system tells him to assemble his forces and stick strictly to the main story so the entire truth can reveal itself naturally. Nox throws his hands up in frustration, demanding to know if that is really all the information he gets. He rubs his temples in a richly decorated room, trying to process the fact that he is now the final boss of Inner Lunatic. He narrows his purple eyes in frustration, realizing that following the main story means navigating a highly lethal path. He stands amidst glowing magical energy and vows to follow the plot perfectly no matter what it takes. A brilliant burst of purple light hits a nearby book as he swears to figure out this world's mechanics. He locks his gaze forward, determined to survive despite the impossible odds stacked against him. He shifts into a low combat stance and grips an imaginary hilt to test his physical coordination. A memory of a quiet study reminds him that every single second spent in his past life was just a slow march toward death. He notes that while he used to live in constant fear, the only thing that has truly changed is the setting. A sudden crash echoes through a massive hall as the calendar dates flip to February 4th, 1812. Knox stands tall and realizes that, with the current date locked in, he has an incredibly short amount of time to prepare. He steps toward a decorative indoor railing and grips the stone firmly with his right hand. A sharp spasm shoots through his arm, triggering a negative system alert, stating that frequent sickness has granted him wrist inflammation, level 1. He curses out loud in sheer disbelief as his body begins to tremble from the minor strain. He stumbles backward in absolute agony, completely appalled by how fragile his new physical form is. Outside in the courtyard, a maid in a black and white uniform finishes an intense chore with a heavy sigh. Knox approaches her with a freezing glare, causing the maid to gasp and look completely terrified by his sudden presence. He commands her to listen closely as she trembles under his notoriously unstable reputation. Knox maintains a completely unbothered expression, while the maid keeps her eyes glued to the floor. He walks down an ornate hallway and reminds himself that, within the family estate, he is supposed to act entirely unhinged. The maid scurries behind him and asks where he is heading so early, prompting him to curtly answer the practice hall. He gestures over his shoulder and barks at Rona to follow him immediately as they head toward a massive classical temple building. Rona keeps a safe distance behind him, stealing nervous glances at his white coat as they step through the entrance. Knox stares blankly ahead and reminds himself that his absolute priority right now is basic physical survival. He watches structural beams pass overhead and resolves to adapt to these brutal limitations as fast as humanly possible. He steps out onto an outdoor balcony, while Rona watches him with a mixture of confusion and intense anxiety. Knox reminds himself that since he cleared this exact game 27 times, he knows every single hidden exploit available. He glances at a damaged stone pillar and runs through the core layout of Inner Lunatic in his head. A vision of a black-winged creature clashing against a golden shield reminds him of the world's deepest lore. He recalls that the most powerful element of the game interface was the sheer depth of character customization. He visualizes the skill grid, remembering that players are normally restricted to a single genius trait. He smiles confidently, knowing that his current body uniquely breaks the rules by possessing 2 of them. He recalls the exact trait penalty screen that forced the terminally ill status onto his character sheet during creation. He knows that his swordsmanship and combat genius trait grants him the ability to reach the absolute peak of blade mastery. He visualizes a mage standing amidst intense flames, noting that his mana sensitivity genius trait makes casting spells perfectly efficient. He points forward confidently, noting that his specialized insight skill allows him to instantly read the status windows of anyone around him. He observes a phantom crowd on a grand staircase and notes that his Master of Acting trait is going to save his life. He looks down at his light robes and sighs at the reality that he is essentially a walking hospital. He remembers that his environmental debuffs mean he will pass out from frequent sickness at least once every single chapter. He shrugs off the stress, deciding to just take things one single step at a time. A heavy thud echoes through the courtyard as he finally arrives at the entrance of the main training grounds. Rona lags behind in total disbelief, wondering if her notoriously lazy young master is genuinely planning to exercise. Knox ignores her entirely, turning his profile toward the grand training hall as Rona stays frozen in place. He steps through an arched stone doorway and notes that his strategic assessment yields only one conclusion. He grips a massive sword hilt with both hands and bluntly admits to himself that he is completely screwed. He lets out a strained laugh in an empty training square, comparing his current situation to reading the opening chapter of a tragedy. He drops 2 heavy training swords onto the tiled floor as his breath hitches from the minor physical movement. He stares down at the weapons, frustrated by the fact that he cannot even swing a blade 10 times without collapsing. He curses the curse of the weak for making the absolute baseline of physical training this agonizingly difficult. He collapses flat on his back in the center of the massive Gothic cathedral hall, looking up at the high vaulted ceilings. He looks over at the weapons rack and reminds himself that the entire Reinhafer family legacy began strictly with the sword. He notes that his family holds the terrifying official title of the High House of the Blade and Darkness. He recalls that their lineage is famous for imbuing dark attribute magic into their blades to completely vaporize their enemies. He visualizes the family head's legendary weapon, famously known across the realm as the Tyrannical Blade of Darkness. He pushes himself up off the floor and notes that the ancestral blade has been passed down across generations. He grins widely and makes a tight fist, declaring that the absolute best perk of this family is their absurd amount of money. He notes that, as one of the greatest noble houses in the story, they are completely and insanely rich. He walks across the polished tiles, glad that even a completely useless youngest son has enough wealth to never work a day in his life. He stands by a massive stone pillar, planning to spend every single coin available to fix his broken physical stats. He looks toward the entrance and waits impatiently for Rona to return with the specific items he requested. A few minutes prior, Rona places a fresh towel and a wooden sword on a table while looking completely anxious. Nox checks the perimeter to ensure nobody is around before abruptly commanding Rona to get over here. Rona recoils in sudden terror, causing Nox to look at her with an entirely blank, confused expression. He reaches out and commands her to bring her ear closer so he can whisper his highly confidential orders. Rona gasps in absolute shock at the massive sum of money he wants to spend, prompting Nox to snap at her to shut up and just figure it out. Rona sprints out of the hall in a panic, muttering that the young master hasn't changed his aggressive attitude one bit. Nox turns back to the training table, hoping Rona can secure the items by tomorrow morning. He reviews his strategy to bypass the level 2 stamina restriction using the specific materials he ordered. A dark shadow falls over the doorway as a stern man in a suit steps forward and formally greets the young master. Nox instantly recognizes the newcomer as Rodwell D. Ernark, the ruthless head butler of the estate. He recalls that Rodwell answers directly to his terrifying father, the supreme family head, Theo von Reinhofer. Nox stands perfectly still, knowing that under normal circumstances, the head butler wouldn't care about a failure like him. Nox activates his Master of Acting trait and coldly demands to know why the butler is here instead of serving the family head. Rodwell bows slightly and announces that he has been ordered by the master to deliver some critical news regarding tonight's dinner. Rodwell locks a serious gaze onto him as Nox tries to remember what little he knows about his family dynamics. Nox fixes a stern expression and tells the butler to inform his father that he cannot attend tonight. Rodwell narrows his eyes and explains that a highly important guest from the Stilliner family has just arrived for night training. Rodwell turns his back and warns him that skipping this specific meal will violently anger the family head. The butler stops in the corridor and notes that the young master is acting incredibly odd today. Rodwell glares through his glasses and demands to know the exact reason behind this sudden refusal. Nox steps forward with a freezing glare and warns Rodwell to never attempt to overstep his bounds as a mere butler. He locks eyes with the older man and declares that he is the sole person who decides what he does. Rodwell tenses up in sudden shock before bowing deeply to offer a formal apology. Nox watches the butler walk away down the stone corridor, wondering if the sharp old man noticed his lack of real mana. The sun sets over the massive noble estate as Nox rests his hand against a wooden frame inside the main estate. He pants heavily from the brief walk, completely stunned that a massive plot event is breaking out so early. He looks toward the main dining hall, recognizing the red-haired lady of the Stilliner family standing in the distance. He questions what she is doing here as he enters the grand dining pavilion under a darkening sky. Sitting at the luxury table, his arrogant brother snickers that the family idiot actually showed up to ruin the meal. Nox stands before his twin brothers, Hartz and Alan, who openly scoff at his presence from across the table. The twins loudly gossip about how Nox is a completely lost cause, while Nox merely lets out an exasperated sigh. The heavy double doors fly open as a terrifying presence steps into the formal dining room. Theo von Reinhofer stands proudly in his long, dark coat as the entire room falls dead silent. A young woman with long red hair steps forward and formally introduces herself as Talia von Stilliner. Theo looks down at his sons and commands them to feel absolutely free to give her a warm welcome during her stay. Nox stares at Talia's determined expression, recognizing her as the definitive primary hero of Inner Lunatic. He locks his gaze onto her, fully aware that she's the exact character destined to plunge a sword through his chest in the future. Tio takes his seat at the head of the table and notes that even his useless youngest son decided to make an appearance. Nox maintains an entirely stone-faced profile as his father commands everyone to go ahead and begin eating. The brothers dig into the massive spread of gourmet meats while shooting questioning glares at a completely calm Nox. The oldest brother suddenly stands up and states that it is officially time for their father to make a definitive decision. Nox stares down at his plate, knowing that the upcoming decision involves entry into Eldine Academy. He looks across the room, fully aware that attending the academy is his absolute only shot at survival. Tio sets his glass down and reminds the table that the academy strictly limits entry to 3 individuals per noble family. Tio looks across the luxury room and notes that he has already designated the first 2 slots to his eldest sons. The family head stands tall and declares that the final slot will be decided strictly through historical family tradition. He fixes a hard stare onto his children and announces that the final attendee will be chosen via a duel in the practice hall in 1 month. The twin brothers turn to Nox and mockingly advise him to stay completely quiet before he embarrasses himself against real swordsmen. Nox glares right back at them and coldly states that they can talk about winning after they actually manage to beat him. The twins slam their hands on the table in fury as Nox confidently declares that he will be the one attending Eldine Academy. The brothers let out a sharp scoff while Talia watches the sudden family dispute with a deeply amused smile. Talia notes that the young master seems to have an immense amount of confidence, causing Nox to break his gaze in surprise. Later that night, Rodwell meets privately with Teo in his study and reports that something has definitively changed about Nox. Rodwell stands straight and admits that if he hadn't witnessed Nox's intense behavior firsthand, he never would have believed it. Teo looks out into the dark courtyard and openly wonders if his son has somehow been possessed by a demon. Teo turns back to his head butler and commands Rodwell to continue keeping a highly vigilant eye on Nox. The next morning breaks over the estate grounds as a sudden crash echoes near the training barracks. Nox gasps for air in total exhaustion, his face covered in sweat as he forces his body forward. He panics over the fact that a lethal family duel is scheduled in exactly 1 month, wondering how he can possibly close the gap. He stands in the middle of an open dirt square, deeply confused as to why his body feels completely unresponsive. A digital chime rings out to confirm that his stamina stat has increased by a miserable 0.1 after a massive run. He activates his status window, reviewing his genius traits while cursing the fact that his base body is naturally too weak to use them. He glances down at his uniform and notes that with the curse of the weak active, it took an entire month of agony just to raise his stats slightly. The system displays a dark prompt, confirming that the curse of the weak halves his total growth rate permanently. He realizes that because his terminally ill trait also halves his growth, his total progression is completely crippled. He checks his locked stats of 15 stamina and 30 mana, deeply frustrated by how little progress he has made despite his absolute best efforts. The side door slides open as the smiling Nox catches sight of Rona returning to the training hall early. He looks down at the table where Rona has laid out the poison of the 3-headed Gorgon, the dew of the Remembering Fairy, and a golem core. He unrolls a rapid stamina growth scroll and grins, planning to use his complete game knowledge to execute a dangerous exploit. He shifts into an active posture, while Rona demands to know why he needs such incredibly dangerous items. Rona gestures frantically, explaining that the monster poison is highly lethal, completely avoided by normal merchants, and absurdly expensive. Nox steps up to the wooden box on the floor, causing Rona to let out a sharp shriek of terror as he reaches for the vial. He uncaps the glowing blue bottle and mutters that he can tell the fluid is completely lethal just by looking at it. He downs the contents in a single gulp, triggering a system alert that temporarily multiplies his current health by 1.5. Rona screams that she is going to call the head butler right before Nox grabs the golem core and swallows it whole, triggering a petrification warning. Nox smiles through the intense pain as the system confirms the Gorgon poison is actively neutralizing the petrification of the golem core. He remembers that while a golem core normally turns human flesh completely into stone, the specific acid combination alters the reaction. The chemical composition causes a brilliant flash of blue energy to ripple entirely across his chest. A massive system window explodes onto the screen to announce that the negative trait curse of the week has been completely deleted. Rona bursts into tears and asks if he is okay, prompting a completely focused Nox to declare that there is still one final step remaining. Nox sits completely still on the stone floor as a terrified Rona slowly edges away from him. He tells her to stay back as he downs the dew of the remembering fairy, instantly erasing the residual petrification effects. His purple eyes glow brightly as a system notification confirms that a hidden piece has been successfully activated. The interface reveals that he has unlocked the positive trait blessing of growth, which permanently doubles his stat growth rate until his stamina reaches 5. He rips open the rapid stamina growth scroll to double his multipliers again, standing tall as the curse vanishes completely. Rona gasps in total shock as Nox suddenly strips off his sweat-stained shirt, demanding that she just bring him a clean towel immediately. Rona stares at his upper torso with wide, expressive eyes, while a confident Nox confirms that he feels entirely perfect. Rona asks what his next move is, prompting Nox to turn toward the outdoor track with a faint, knowing smile. He looks out across the open training grounds and commands himself to run. Nox breathes heavily as he continues his intense training under the open sky. Nox pushes his fragile body to its absolute limits, panting with every step he takes. Talia watches him from a distance, completely baffled by why someone so weak would accept a match against his brothers. Talia's maid Emma drops her head and warns her mistress that it is incredibly rude to stare at the youngest son of the Reinharnated family like that. Talia snaps back defensively, complaining that Nox doesn't even bother to wield a sword and does nothing but run around. She notes that even though the other knights of Reinharnated offered to teach him, he flatly declined all of their offers. Talia tells Emma that she will be right back, resolving to confront the strange young master directly. Nox halts his training routine as a sudden shadow falls over the ground in front of him. Talia makes a highly dramatic stance and proudly calls out her own name to lock his full attention. Nox panics internally, desperately wondering why the game's primary hero has suddenly come looking for him in private. Talia confidently assumes to herself that he is simply too surprised by her striking beauty to speak. She intensely demands to know if he is truly certain he can beat his brothers, prompting Nox to give a silent, firm nod. Talia questions if he really thinks running gives him a chance, stating she is willing to personally help him prepare. Nox delivers a flat, blunt refusal, leaving the proud hero completely shell-shocked. Talia fires up in a sudden rage, highly offended by how dare he treat her voluntary offer with such blatant disrespect. Rona drops into the conversation to tease the young master, playfully warning that girls will absolutely hate him if he talks like that. Talia storms away from the grounds in a massive huff, leaving Nox alone to review his interface stats. Nox reads the system parameters, noting that while average grown males have a stamina stat around 4, Talia's baseline is an incredible 6. He carefully considers her overwhelming attributes, while keeping his hand near his mouth in deep thought. He recalls the game lore stating her fire magic eventually awakens to absolute peak white flames. He notes that she holds the definitive potential to easily slaughter a couple of high-tier demons down the line. He remembers the brutal reality that her signature flames are destined to completely burn the demonized villain Nox away in the future story. Nox ponders his internal layout, questioning if it is truly possible to stay on good terms with the person meant to kill him. We jump forward exactly 1 month as the day of the highly anticipated family arena duel finally arrives. The noble family takes their formal places around the grand hall to witness the matching talents. The spectators praise the legendary martial lineage of the house as the fighters prepare their weapons. Alan steps out onto the stone arena floor, drawing his blade with an intense, serious expression. The older sibling shifts into a ready stance as the surrounding family watches with high expectations. Nox walks calmly out onto the field, bracing himself for the immediate physical confrontation. He takes a deep breath and reflects on the core philosophical path required to become a proper knight. He reminds himself that a true warrior must remain entirely frugal, never allowing their mind to be consumed by greed. He centers his focus on the essential forms of the sword required to survive this cutthroat environment. The morning light fills the massive stone arena complex. As the primary observers settle into the high balconies, Nox takes his place in the absolute center of the large circular plaza, completely isolated before his family. The spectators lean over the ornate railings, murmuring quietly about the sheer absurdity of the upcoming matchup. The patriarch Tio addresses his head butler, directly demanding to know what Rodwell thinks will become of this duel. Rodwell stands tall alongside the family head, maintaining a highly serious gaze on the arena floor below. Rodwell clears his throat loudly, demanding absolute attention from the entire assembled house. The head butler formally announces that the official duel to decide the entry right for Eldine Academy will now begin. Rodwell confidently voices that, considering young Master Allen's superior past performances, his victory is a complete given. Tio looks down at the plaza and calmly answers that he fully expects the exact same predictable outcome. Nox readies his balance, knowing that the ultimate peak of a warrior's art is decided by how long they have considered it. He stares across the stone hall, recognizing the seemingly unclimbable physical wall that separates him from his brothers. He locks his gaze forward, telling himself that the actual possibility of flipping this match on its head isn't zero. He recalls the legendary baseline power associated with the true talent of a fabled sword emperor. Nox curses his terrible luck as a system prompt confirms he failed to reach a baseline stamina stat of 4 before today. He pulls up his interface to find his stamina sitting at a fragile 3.8 while panting heavily. He recalls his conversation with Rona, where she joked about who would take care of her if he didn't survive his training. A memory flashes of Rona playfully accusing him of cursing her in his mind, which Nox quietly denied. He remembers standing entirely stunned after his insight skill revealed. Rona holds a starting stamina stat of 4.5. He laments the deeply upsetting reality that his own maid is naturally stronger than an average man, despite his intense month of training. Back in the training yard the evening prior, Nox had noted the setting sun and realized he had completely run out of time. He had panted heavily in the shadows, admitting to himself that ordinary methods would never allow his fragile body to claim victory. One of his older brothers had intercepted him, mockingly asking why he doesn't just give up right now. Nox played along with a confident smirk, joking that he only wants to win to impress the daughter of the Stilliner family. He shifted his focus back to his strategy, fully aware that a head-on physical clash would guarantee his destruction. Back in the present arena, the referee commands both Nox and Allen to step forward and accept whatever the results may be. He declares that no objections will be tolerated, as Nox admits his entire survival plan is over if he loses here. Nox reminds himself that if he fails to secure his academy admission, his 1-year grace period will end in certain death. The official asks if both combatants are fully ready and loudly commands the match to begin. Allen charges forward instantly, flashing his blade as he moves in for a quick, decisive strike. Nox evades the initial rush, swinging his own blade to block the heavy oncoming momentum. The two weapons clash with massive force as both fighters slide across the smooth stone floor. Nox drives his weight forward, completely determined to shatter his brother's aggressive defensive line. A massive impact rings out across the arena as Nox reminds himself that losing means giving up everything. He realizes that if he can somehow win this clash, his baseline stamina stat will finally increase. Allen laughs mockingly, asking Nox if he has already hit him in the head too many times during the exchange. Allen screams that he will make Nox feel much better once he beats him into the stone floor a bit more. Nox parries another heavy blow, entirely unfazed by his brother's pathetic taunts. The family head? Teo watches the exchange closely, waiting to see how the house's legacy will progress. Tio notes that he was genuinely looking forward to seeing how much the youngest son had actually changed. He sighs that while Nox is putting up a fight, both brothers are still entirely lacking compared to his first son, Garen. He reflects on the supreme power required to completely overpower opponents and place everything under one's feet. Tio looks down at the field, wondering which of his children will eventually inherit the fabled dark sword of domination. Nox receives a minor stat increase mid-fight as he prepares to unleash his absolute trump card. A massive system notification flashes as his locked trait, Swordsmanship and Combat Genius, successfully activates. Nox smiles intensely and immediately commands the system to activate his unique skill, Hour of the Genius. A brilliant geometric light explodes across the arena floor as the active skill takes full effect. Nox positions his body for a rapid counterattack as the magical energy swirls heavily around his blade. The system notes that geniuses experience a completely different hour of the day as the entire world slows down to an absolute crawl. Nox recognizes the powerful perception skill, watching his brother's movements grind to a complete halt before him. He slides seamlessly past his brother's guard, calmly declaring that the match is officially over. His blade tears through the air with rapid speed, delivering a violent physical impact to his opponent. Nox flashes a confident smirk as he executes a flawless tactical chain against the second brother. He follows through with a final, crushing sword strike, loudly declaring that he will win this duel. A massive wave of dark sword energy ripples completely across the arena plaza. Alan lets out a sharp groan as he is thrown backward, completely unable to track Nox's hyper-fast movements. Nox grins intensely and admits that this level of combat is actually starting to become fun. He reminds himself that the total duration of the perception skill is strictly limited to 5 minutes. He calls out to his older brothers, mockingly stating that he was completely going easy on them up until now. Nox demands to finish this tedious match as quickly as possible, telling both siblings to come at him all at once. Nox looks up toward the high balcony and directly asks his father for official permission to fight both brothers at the same time. The twin brothers look on in complete disbelief as Tio shifts his gaze down in absolute silence. Tio narrows his sharp eyes, recognizing that the youngest son's absolute vigor has completely transformed. The patriarch clasps his hands behind his back and formally permits the sudden 2-on-1 spar. He barks to the arena to begin, as Nox immediately draws his weapon and prepares to engage. Nox raises his sword vertically with both hands, commanding his two brothers to be fully prepared. Hartz and Alan charge in tandem, trying to lock down his movements from both flanks. Blades collide in a rapid, chaotic, three-way exchange of steel echoing through the plaza. Alan screams at Hartz to hurry up and close the distance on Nox's left side, prompting a furious shout to shut up. Nox slips between their combined assault with absolute ease, his eyes glowing with purple energy. A system notification reveals his dark family swordsmanship proficiency has rapidly increased as he tracks every single blade perfectly. He shatters their defensive stances with a series of blindingly fast, heavy counterstrikes. Nox drives a final, overwhelming physical blow right into the center of his brother's ranks. The twins are sent crashing violently into the stone floor, completely defeated and unable to move. Watching from the high balcony railing, Talia gasps in absolute shock at the total destruction of the two older brothers. The spectators stand completely stunned, wondering how on earth the family failure could achieve such an absolute victory. Nox stands perfectly tall amidst the debris, sheathing his training sword with a completely calm expression. He notes that despite the high stakes of the academy admission, the spar went entirely according to his strategy. A final lingering burst of dark, magical energy settles around the perimeter of the empty combat square. Nox catches his breath as Talia watches him with an incredibly intense, suspicious expression. His brother lets out a painful gasp from the floor, completely horrified that such a loss was even possible. The defeated siblings curse in absolute agony as the reality of their crushing failure sets in. Nox walks away from the center of the sand, trying to regulate his heavily racing pulse. The arena official steps forward, pointing directly to the victor as he prepares to make the formal announcement. He loudly declares to the entire house that the official victor of the duel is young Master Nox von Reinhofer. The twin brothers curse his name in bitter defeat as Nox quietly exits the main arena floor. Nox makes his way out to an isolated stone corridor to escape the prying eyes of the family. He slumps against the wall as Talia sprints into the hallway, completely determined to catch up with him immediately. She corners him near the stone pillars, demanding to know the exact truth behind his sudden surge in power. Nox suddenly doubles over and unleashes a violent cough, hacking up a bright pool of blood right onto the floor. He pants heavily in absolute agony, staring down at the fresh blood covering his trembling hands. A system notification flashes to reveal that his perception skill carries a massive, permanent drawback known as recoil. The text warns that exceeding the exact limit has permanently stripped 2 days and 17 hours straight off his lifespan. Nox thinks to himself that he is incredibly glad this severe recoil didn't trigger out in front of the arena crowd. He realizes that if his father or the butler had discovered this fragile state, his academy admission would have been immediately canceled. Talia steps closer into the dim lighting, her eyes widening in sudden horror at his bleeding state. She softly asks if he was severely injured during the spar, causing Nox to curse his terrible timing out loud. Nox grinds his teeth in frustration, furious that the primary hero discovered his most vulnerable secret. Talia steps right in front of him, staring intently at his broken, fragile physical form. She stammers in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend how a body so damaged could execute such a victory. She reflects heavily on everything she witnessed from him over the entire past month of training. She admits to herself that she originally assumed his rapid win was solely due to a hidden, natural genius. She recalls how she desperately wanted to ask him exactly how he had awakened and trained such incredible talent. But seeing him completely broken in isolation makes her wonder why he's in such a devastating state. Talia realizes that Nox is definitely not the lazy, good-for-nothing failure that the estate rumors claimed. She recognizes that he simply pushed his body to an agonizing degree just to ensure he could win no matter what. Nox lets out another heavy cough, causing a panicked Talia to reach out and ask if he is truly okay. Nox fiercely swats her hand away, coldly commanding the young hero to not dare touch him. He turns away, stiffly admitting that his obsession with his own training makes it incredibly hard to get along with others. Talia lowers her gaze and offers a soft, genuine apology to him, completely catching Nox off guard. She admits that she had absolutely no idea he was that completely serious about mastering the way of the sword. She notes that his weak birth explains his training, realizing his unhinged reputation was likely completely misunderstood. Nox looks at her, quietly noting that if she chooses to view his desperate struggle in that light, he won't correct her. Talia firmly promises to keep his secret, allowing Nox to realize he no longer has to worry about the family finding out. She commands him to keep his ultimate promise as she turns around and exits the quiet corridor. The next day, Tio sits formally at his grand desk, noting to Rodwell that his initial assessments were completely correct. He directly asks the head butler for his definitive assessment regarding the youngest son's sudden display of talent. Rodwell stands tall, admitting that he originally couldn't comprehend why Nox allowed himself to be beat up for years. The butler suggests that Nox is still intentionally hiding an immense amount of latent ability from the family. Tio taps his gloved hand on the desk, listening closely to his chief advisor's strategic observations. Tio stands by the massive windows, reminding Rodwell that his upcoming assignments are highly important for the house. Rodwell bows deeply and vows to do his absolute best as night falls over the grand, noble estate. Nox rests alone in his quarters as a system alert confirms he has successfully completed the baseline tutorial quest. He pulls up his personal status window, waiting for the system to roll out his official clear rewards. He grumbles that he had to run for an entire month just to shift his stamina slightly, wishing they gave out rewards earlier. He spots his updated values, gasping in surprise as he realizes his massive jackpot is actually a level 10 luck stat. He notes that luck is highly valuable because it is the single stat that can never be increased through hard work. The interface grants him a special mass clear benefit, awarding him a random gacha voucher and a one-time skill confirmation voucher. Nox sighs in absolute relief that the metagame benefit system carried over, deciding to roll the gacha immediately. A sudden, brilliant flash of energy ripples across his room, making the physical manifestation feel entirely alien in reality. He reads the scrolling mechanics, noting that basic ranks display as white, while intermediate skills show as silver. He reminds himself that advanced abilities flash gold, while the absolute highest ranks glow with a rainbow color. A massive gold light engulfs the parchment, prompting Nox to shout out loud that the high-rank prize has finally appeared. The system identifies the scroll, confirming he has successfully obtained the advanced trait known as Supreme Ruler's Awe. He reads the effect, cheering over the massive jackpot that automatically reduces all stats of weaker opponents by 20%. He looks at his second item, immediately deciding to use the one-time skill confirmation voucher to secure his next target. He reviews his meta-knowledge, recalling a highly powerful hidden piece locked within the Reinhafer family grounds. He looks at the scroll, fully aware that he absolutely needs this specific, specialized skill to claim the prize. He notes that his father will soon gather all the siblings, resolving to execute his strategy the exact moment they meet. He stops to think, realizing it is officially time for the eldest son Garen to return home after graduating Eldine Academy. He knows Garen is currently traveling for night training, meaning he must secure the hidden piece before his monstrous brother arrives. He tells himself that he no longer needs to worry about Talia because she is not the type of character to break a promise. He rests easy, fully believing she has absolutely no strategic reason to ever approach his territory again. The very next morning, Nox finds Talia blocking his path in the corridor and demands to know what she wants from him now. Talia steps forward aggressively, pointing a finger and loudly commanding him to tell her the truth. She demands to know exactly how he managed to become so incredibly strong in such a short amount of time. Nox looks at her in absolute silence, completely unbothered by her loud, dramatic behavior. He smirks and calmly notes that she must have secretly watched him train for the entire past month. Talia blushes furiously and stammers in shock, while Nox recalls that she is desperate to be recognized by her older sister. He steps closer and tells the young hero that she needs to focus entirely on her own massive natural talents first. Talia looks down in surprise as Nox fixes a serious expression and instructs her to never compare herself to others. He gives a casual wave and walks past her, leaving the red-haired hero standing completely silent in the hallway. Talia lets out a long, quiet sigh as she watches his departing figure disappear down the grand stone corridor. She stands alone in the massive pavilion, deeply reflecting on the mysterious young master's cryptic advice. The next day, the scene shifts directly to the massive traditional horse stables located on the edge of the estate. The family gathers outside the barracks as the knights present the absolute finest steeds on the continent. The patriarch Tio stands before his gathered children, announcing that he has called them here for a vital family choice. Nox steps into the stable yard, smiling confidently as he realizes the highly anticipated mount selection event is finally happening. He reviews his game knowledge, recalling that horses are considered the absolute holiest companions for mages and knights. He notes that every young warrior must choose a lifelong companion to accompany them into the upcoming Grand Wars. He reminds himself that Eldine Academy explicitly teaches riding, making high-tiered transportation absolutely essential for the plot. He notes that replacement horses are hard to raise and teleportation magic is absurdly expensive, forcing him to choose wisely. Tio calls out to the group, announcing that as the official victor of the duel, Nox von Reinhafer gets the first pick. The twin brothers look on in complete envy as Tio tells Nox that he will grant him just one single chance to choose his beast. Nox walks down the row of wooden fences, carefully evaluating the different premium mounts with a slight smile. The knights walk behind him, highly curious to see which pristine creature the youngest son will select. He passes several beautiful brown horses, admitting they are cute, but noting they are not what he is looking for. He suddenly halts at the very end of the stable row, his eyes widening as he spots his exact target. He bypasses all the pristine royal steeds and walks directly toward a rare, white muscular beast standing alongside canine-like creatures. Nox points his finger firmly at the animal, loudly declaring to his father that he will choose this exact one. Teo stares at the beast in absolute shock, sternly telling Nox that he will give him another chance to change his mind. Nox refuses to back down, pulling up the hidden interface to inspect the creature's true internal metrics. The data confirms the mount holds a legendary base rank that allows it to grow multiple tiers past the highest level. He notes that the animal belongs to the fabled obsidian breed, making it the single most rare creature in the entire game world. He realizes that if his father actually understood its true lineage, the patriarch would have claimed the prize for himself long ago. He reviews its status screen, noting the positive traits are currently blocked by a brutal debuff labeled Expected Death. Nox reads the countdown timer, showing less than 3 days left to live, but stands firm in his definitive choice. He smiles confidently, knowing his absolute metagame knowledge holds the exact secret exploit required to save the dying animal. Tio watches him lean against the failing creature, deeply disappointed that his son is making such a weak, emotional choice, successfully curing his condition like someone finally passing a week-long block of constipation. The family head turns his back in disgust, coldly warning Knox that he better not dare regret this terrible decision. The twin brothers snicker in the background as the butler steps forward to finalize the official paperwork. Rodwell hands over the registry, formally instructing the young master to choose a definitive name for his new mount. Knox looks down at the white beast with an entirely serious expression, ready to name his ultimate hidden piece. Knox formally chooses the name Carl for his new mount because it holds a highly meaningful personal history for him. The scene shifts back inside the estate hallways as Knox prepares his immediate strategy. Knox looks down at the white beast, noting that they are both broken entities fighting an uphill battle. He sighs. That much like his own desperate struggle to live, this rare mount is also trying to stretch out its limited time. He determines that they are both struggling to live a bit longer before calling out to Rona. Rona trips into the quarters and stumbles, nervously asking her master how he immediately knew she was lingering out there. Knox drops the horse directly onto his luxury bed sheets, prompting Rona to complain bitterly that she is the one who will have to clean all of this up. Knox instructs her to do her absolute best to care for the beast, since it is a highly vulnerable, sick animal. Rona reluctantly accepts the duty, while Knox steps back, wondering if the panicked maid will truly be able to handle this problematic situation. Rona reluctantly accepts the duty, while Knox steps back, wondering if the panicked maid will truly be able to handle this problematic situation. 3 days fly by rapidly before Rona bursts into the room crying hysterically that Carl has officially left the world. Knox stands perfectly still as she wails over the animal, maintaining a completely serious posture. He quietly reflects that his strategic game knowledge guaranteed he already knew this exact fatal event would unfold. He commands the maid to stop crying because she is distracting him, calmly reassuring her that the beast will soon return directly to his side. Rona gasps in total confusion as Knox intensely orders her to drop everything and get behind his back right now. Knox prepares his one-time voucher, planning to force raw mana straight into the specialized scroll. A heavy surge of magical pressure rings out across the small room as he initiates the forbidden necromancy ritual. Rona panics in absolute shock, stammering that using mana under the age of 15 is heavily illegal in the Empire. Knox glares back fiercely, warning her that if she keeps distracting him, Carl will die a second time and it will be completely her fault. He notes that because he hasn't officially awakened his genius mana detection trait yet, his control remains entirely unstable. The interface parameters outline the strict Imperial restrictions against underage magic users across the realm. Knox realizes his only viable option right now is to aggressively pour as much raw pool as he can directly into the script. He watches the purple energy swirl heavily around his fingers, telling himself that he absolutely cannot afford to make a single mistake. A system notification flashes to confirm that the one-time black magic spell, Book of the Dead, has successfully activated. The interface prompts him to confirm the resurrection as the dark energy completely overrides the horse's fatal debuff timer. He recalls the game parameters detailing that creatures resurrected through black magic are reborn as vastly more powerful entities. He notes that undead companions maintain a sense of self and remain blindly loyal to their master, almost to a severe fault. He reflects on the opposing lineages of the Dart families, comparing his own night house to the necromancer houses. Knox monitors the shifting elements as the massive dark grimoire manifests physically before his eyes. The voucher energy completely consumes the scroll, forcing a violent burst of magical pressure across the floor tiles. Purple sparks explode throughout the quarters as the ritual reaches its final critical transition stage. Knox stands his ground firmly, completely determined to anchor the rising dark entity. Rona lets out a sharp shriek of pure terror as the dense magical aura surges to its peak. Knox gasps out loud as his internal reservoir hits a wall, cursing that his mana is bottoming out at the worst possible moment. He fights through the physical strain, driving the last remnants of his energy into the spell array. A digital chime rings out to signal that the active skill has been successfully triggered. The interface logs a massive text, confirming that his chosen mount has officially been resurrected as an undead warrior pet. Rona stammers, in complete bewilderment as a massive blue-gray creature with razor-sharp fangs materializes right in front of them. The updated block reveals that Carl's negative, expected death trait has been completely erased, granting the pet a permanent growth multiplier. Nox locks his gaze onto the monstrous beast, calmly declaring that he will act as its true master from this moment on. He catches a sudden rustle near the perimeter, causing him to alertly call out Rona's name. Rona hysterically demands that the monster spit out the carrot she previously fed it, completely shattering the tense atmosphere. Nox smiles confidently to himself, noting that his next critical strategic target is the family's second hidden piece. A few days fly by as Nox quietly slips out of the estate grounds under a dark, heavy sky. He maneuvers through the dense, overgrown brush on the absolute edge of the family's primary territory. He reaches into the shadows, checking his physical layout as he prepares to breach the forbidden boundary. He centers his focus, quietly questioning if his underlying meta-senses are being slightly too sensitive tonight. He reminds himself that this world is no longer just a simple game, forcing him to adapt to a highly dangerous new reality. He passes a wooden warning sign strictly prohibiting children from entering the perimeter, firmly declaring that he refuses to die a second time. A flashing red alert confirms his entry into the missing child's forest, warning that failure to clear this palace guarantees immediate death. Nox runs through his knowledge of the prohibited terrain, noting that the mechanics of the layout are heavily unique. He reviews the artifact constraints, recalling that the scaling difficulty of the monsters heavily increases if a grown adult steps foot inside. He notes that since only children can enter safely, the maximum difficulty of the forest remains locked at a manageable 2.5 stars. He unrolls his inventory map, confident that this specific layout is the absolute perfect fit for his terminal attributes. He plants his boots on the damp dirt path and readies his sword as he pushes deeper into the dense canopy. Nox abruptly stops in a clearing and demands to know how long his stalker intends to hide out in the brush. He grips his hilt tightly, loudly commanding the unseen presence to quit crouching in the shadows and reveal themselves immediately. A sudden rustle breaks out behind the foliage as a startled figure tries to retreat back into the deeper brush. Talia von Stilliner emerges into the dim clearing, grumbling to herself in frustration that her striking beauty completely failed to work on him. Talia glares at him with intense eyes, complaining out loud that she cannot comprehend his unbothered behavior at all. Her maid Emma hurries up behind her, desperately begging her mistress to please stop following the youngest son around the estate. Talia dismisses the warning entirely, while Emma worries that the young lady's intense inferiority complex toward her older sister is making her reckless. Emma gasps out loud in sudden concern as the two noble children lock eyes in the center of the dark path. A sudden dangerous howl echoes through the trees, causing the estate guards to shout out for everyone to wake up immediately. Talia readies a low combat stance, trying to look completely unbothered by the sudden escalation. Nox looks back in surprise, flatly asking what she is doing out here, prompting a panicked Talia to stammer a highly nervous greeting. Talia abruptly shifts her posture, drawing her sword and loudly commanding Nox to drop back and get behind her. A low growl ripples through the deep grass as a massive shadow shifts heavily through the perimeter brush. Talia tenses up as she identifies the incoming threat, realizing they have accidentally marched straight into Grey Wolf territory. A massive alpha wolf emerges onto the path, baring its sharp teeth and locking its yellow eyes onto the kids. The creature unleashes a deafening roar that echoes violently through the center of the forest clearing. Nox narrows his purple eyes, carefully analyzing the elite monster's aggressive patterns as it positions for an ambush. Talia maintains her hard gaze on the beast, her weapon glowing with dense elemental magic as she prepares to launch. The monster launches forward with extreme speed, tearing through the tall weeds in a direct charge. Talia blocks the initial leap with a clean, explosive strike, leaving her completely stunned by the creature's heavy physical mass. Nox steps past her with blood covering his cheek, coldly ordering her to tell him the exact truth behind her presence. Talia laughs nervously and covers her panic by claiming she was merely out for a casual night stroll, prompting Nox to warn her to stop lying or he will leave her behind. Talia tenses up in deep embarrassment, finally admitting that she secretly trailed him because she desperately wanted to learn his rapid training secrets. She lowers her head and confesses that she followed his path into the woods without thinking much about the underlying danger. Nox lets out a heavy sigh, realizing that since she is a core plot character, he cannot simply leave her behind to die. He curtly tells her to follow his lead for now, making it completely clear that he has absolutely zero intention of helping her. He states that he is solely resolving the situation, so his own family doesn't get placed in a bad strategic spot. Talia gasps in total shock at his harsh words, while Nox focuses his attention back on the perimeter weeds. Talia whispers a soft thanks as they continue their march through the darkening thicket. Nox maintains a completely unbothered expression, alertly scanning the terrain for any oncoming threats. A row of glowing white eyes suddenly lights up in the shadows ahead, signaling a massive secondary ambush. A terrifying growl fills the air as a massive pack of wolves jumps down from the high ridges. Talia steps into the foreground with her flaming sword, fiercely commanding Nox to step back so he doesn't get in her way. Nox stays low, running through his meta-knowledge to analyze the layout before the main scenario officially starts. He notes that while the prologue boundaries prevent any boss monsters from spawning, an elite gray wolf will definitively act as the floor leader. He tells himself that simply knowing his exact enemy gives him a massive tactical advantage as the pack charges. Nox ducks under a flashing claw, his purple eyes tracking the frantic momentum with complete focus. He parries a heavy leap, recalling how he used to operate when he was still an ordinary real-world player clearing this game. He unleashes a low counter-strike, swinging his weapon with clean form to sever the lead wolf's offensive momentum. He pushes his weight into the steel, screaming out loud that he is currently an absolute weakling who must try harder. Blood splatters across his mouth from the extreme physical strain as Talia watches his fast movements in complete awe. Talia assumes he hasn't even revealed his true maximum power yet, realizing he considers her completely weak. She fires up her elemental blade and charges alongside him, determined to prove her own combat capability. The brush shatters violently as the true elite gray wolf lunges out from the high terrain to crush them. Back at the forest border, the family knights wave their torches in a panic, desperately searching for the missing noble kids. The lead tracker inspects the dirt ground, identifying two distinct sets of small footprints heading past the sign. He reports to his comrades that the young master and Lady Talia have definitively crossed straight into the prohibited forest. The guards panic, fully aware that this specific dungeon ranks as one of the highest hazards within the Reinhafer territory. The narrator notes that the family is entirely oblivious to the hidden fact that only children can successfully clear the zone. The tracking squad notes that Nox completely bypassed the estate's strongest mana barriers to enter the forest intentionally. Standing near the study desk, Rodwell monitors the map and formally admits that his previous evaluations were entirely wrong. The butler accepts that Nox is no longer the frail failure of the past, noting the kids must rely on their own wisdom to escape. Back in the woods, Nox holds a burning branch high to illuminate the dark thicket ahead. Deep in the brush, an estate knight weeps in a panic, crying that his tactical failure has caused the young miss to die. Nox notes that despite her intense fear, Talia is maintaining her elemental focus, commanding her to conserve her energy for a strategic retreat. He targets the pack leader, confident that an elite monster of this tier doesn't represent a fatal threat if handled properly. He steps forward with a stern expression, immediately commanding the interface to activate. Hour of the Genius. The world slows to an absolute crawl as the elite gray wolf lets out a heavy snarl mid-air. Nox slips beneath the flashing jaws, recognizing that this specific creature is behaving far more cunningly than in the video game. He unleashes a hyper-fast tactical sequence, driving his steel right through the center of the pack's line. The remaining wolves abruptly halt their advance, causing Nox to question why they have stopped their assault. The alpha wolf retreats into the deep shadows, using the dense terrain to mask its next coordinate. The creature lunges out from an unexpected angle, its massive jaws opening wide as it breaks his defensive guard. Nox throws his weight into a desperate parry, completely stunned by the monster's advanced environmental execution. Talia swings her flaming sword into the flank, delivering a massive elemental strike to draw the beast away from him. Talia screams that she refuses to back down, causing an entirely shocked Nox to realize the hero has stepped in to save him. The alpha wolf circles back as Talia intensely asks the young master if he is ready to help her finish this. Talia runs to his side in a panic, frantically demanding to know if he has been severely hurt anywhere. Nox looks back in total disbelief, unable to process the fact that his future executioner is actively shielding his body. He pushes himself up and tells her that this is definitely not the time to be acting so carefree. Talia lets out a sigh of relief that he is safe, while Nox laments showing such a pathetic side to the main hero. A sudden deep rumble shakes the tree line as the primary elite monster slowly drags itself back up. Nox notes the beast's recovery, shifting his blade back into an active frontline coordinate. The massive alpha wolf readies its paws, locking its glowing yellow eyes back onto the two children. Nox warns Talia that the final charge is incoming as the creature leaps directly into the air. The monster lands with crushing force, forcing Nox to slide backward across the wet mud. Nox gasps in sudden realization as the alpha outmaneuvers his guard, showing tactical intelligence beyond the game parameters. The creature bites down heavily, tearing through his defense and driving him straight into the dirt. Talia screams his name in pure terror as a massive shockwave of energy flings dust across the path. Nox curses out loud as he stumbles back, furious that a 2.5-star dungeon is pushing him this close to the edge. He states that the official difficulty parameters of this forest need to be heavily revised immediately. He notes that this specific leader is functioning with a far sharper level of cunning than its digital counterpart. He realizes the beast intentionally used the local geographical terrain to manufacture a massive structural opening. He forces his balance back centered, desperate to get his baseline guard up before the final strike lands. The monster opens its jaw wide, prompting Nox to realize it was waiting for him to unleash a massive, desperate swing. The alpha lunges straight for his exposed flank. The exact microsecond, his heavy guard drops. Nox lets out a furious shout as the razor-sharp teeth close in, completely unable to predict the fast angle. He stares right into the gaping mouth of the beast, admitting to himself that his solo judgment was entirely foolish. He questions if he truly believed his fragile body could handle this content alone, calling it a fatal mistake. A sudden steel dagger flies straight through the air, embedding itself deeply into the monster's open mouth. Nox smiles through the blood, noting that if the enemy can exploit an opening, they can create an unexpected variable right back. Talia unleashes a massive, flaming counterstrike that completely shatters the alpha wolf's posture. Nox capitalizes on the distraction instantly, driving his sword straight through the creature's core with a final shout. The elite gray wolf lets out a final, agonizing screech before collapsing heavily onto the forest floor. Nox drops to his knees, panting heavily as Talia sheathes her weapon and runs straight to his coordinate. The surrounding pack flees into the dark woods as absolute silence settles over the empty clearing. Talia kneels beside him, frantically asking if he is okay, prompting Nox to softly answer that he survived solely thanks to her. Nox suddenly halts in his tracks, panicking internally that he just casually thanked the very person destined to murder him in the future. Talia stares at his chest with wide, worried eyes, loudly pointing out that he is actively bleeding from a massive laceration. Nox dismisses her concern, tightly stating that it is just a minor scratch that won't impede his physical movement. A sudden rustle drops from the thick canopy above, causing Nox to alertly spin his blade back into position. He narrows his eyes in the dim light, fully expecting a secondary elite ambush to break out from the high brush. A large black spider drops down from a low branch right in front of Talia's face. The young warrior instantly loses all combat composure, letting out a horrified shriek as she latches onto Nox in a total panic. Nox looks up at her in utter disbelief, demanding to know how a common spider can possibly paralyze a talented fighter like her. He scoffs that if a common household bug terrifies her this easily, she stands absolutely zero chance of ever becoming a proper knight. Talia screams a furious denial as she detaches her grip, highly offended by his harsh rejection of her knightly potential. Nox suddenly doubles over and unleashes a violent cough, his terminal recoil debuff triggering heavy internal bleeding. Talia frantically demands to know if he is truly all right, but Nox simply wipes the blood away and commands her to not worry. He locks his gaze forward, silently admitting to himself that he successfully survived this trial solely due to her timely intervention. He turns his back to the clearing, calmly telling her that their absolute priority right now is to simply find their way out of this forest. Back at the estate perimeter, A guard continues to sniffle loudly, entirely convinced that his negligence caused the noble kids to perish. Rodwell stands tall at the edge of the line, keeping a sharp eye on the dark trees as the knights prepare to launch a formal rescue sweep. The estate guards shout in shock as the magical boundary completely dissolves across the clearing. A flashing system text explicitly confirms that the prohibited forest has been fully cleared. Rodwell watches the golden leaves fall, admitting that the exact scenario they thought was an absolute impossibility has turned into reality. The tracking squad gasps in complete bewilderment as they recognize that young Master Nox is successfully making his way out. A massive shockwave ripples through the background as the forest structure fully shifts after the conquest. Rodwell steps forward and smiles confidently, noting it is incredibly hard to believe the young master is walking out completely unharmed. Nox steps past the edge of the woods and casually asks why the entire household is gathered here. The surrounding forces fuss over the noble children, while Nox mutters that he cannot believe the family is worrying over someone like him. Emma sprints directly into the foreground, tearfully driving a heavy fist right into her mistress Talia's chest out of pure, frantic relief. Nox watches the aggressive strike, quietly noting to himself that the hero's maid clearly possesses an extraordinary baseline stamina stat as well. He looks back at a recovering Talia and tells her that she pulled her own weight out there, advising her to not beat herself up too much. Nox returns to his private quarters and drops his tactical gear bag firmly onto the couch with a heavy sigh. He lets out a breath of pure relief that the trial is finally over, admitting that Rodwell waiting outside with the knights was completely unexpected. A rectangular system window hovers before his hand to confirm he has successfully obtained a new, low-intermediate darkness artifact called the Black Flame Ring. The interface details that the ring requires dark mana to equip, allowing the user to actively steal a fraction of their target's life force upon defeating them. Nox centers his focus onto his hand, admitting that simply equipping the accessory will not instantly cure his terminal condition. He locks the ring onto his finger, declaring that a limited extension is still vastly better than a completely hopeless, dying reality as his mana pool rises. Rona breaks into the room with white ruffles flaring, frantically asking her master if his new magic lets him see through solid objects. She lets out an absolute shriek of panic, demanding to know if that means he can actively see her naked body right now. Nox slaps his forehead in exhaustion, commanding her to stop talking nonsense and challenging her to an immediate arm wrestling match. He grips her hand firmly and counts down to 3, driving her knuckles straight into the table with his enhanced strength. Rona lets out a painful cry, completely bewildered by the sudden physical defeat for her fragile young master. "You!" Nox locks a stern glare onto her and warns that since he is the house's rumored good-for-nothing, he doesn't care about trivial honor and will easily cut her salary by 20%. Rona breaks into loud tears, right as double system warnings flash to announce his frequent sickness trait has triggered a wrist fracture and flu. Groaning in sudden agony, Nox instantly cancels the salary reduction, commanding a panicked Rona to just focus on fetching him some ice and a wet towel. He holds his throbbing arm in the quiet room, trying to regulate his breathing through the painful systemic backlash. He closes his eyes and quietly reminds himself of his baseline identity as Yu-chan before the transmigration. We jump forward 6 months, showing the sprawling estate grounds where a notice card confirms Nox has been officially grounded in his quarters. Nox slumps back and lets out a long, weary sigh, feeling entirely constrained by his current house arrest. He turns his head to address Rona, who answers with a highly nervous stutter from the side of the room. She notes that as a servant of the house, she will face a heavy salary reduction if she speaks poorly of the Supreme Patriarch. Nox watches the blue undead pet Carl thrive in the courtyard, admitting to himself that he cannot afford to carry on like this. A sudden system alert violently flashes a red text box, warning him that his remaining lifespan from terminal illness has dropped to exactly 147 days. Nox stands up with a determined look, right as Rodwell knocks on the outer door to formally announce that the Patriarch has summoned him. Nox follows the butler out toward the grand main hall, preparing his mindset for the direct confrontation with his father. A violent flashback reveals the historical purge of the house, detailing a mountain of shattered armor and blood left in the wake of the battlefield. The memory traces the terrifying legacy known across the realm as the Night of Slaughter, where monstrous entities swarmed the fields. The ancestral forces engaged in a chaotic exchange of steel, cementing the absolute rule of the current patriarch. A heavy elemental pressure completely consumed the terrain, leaving a blood-stained pavement behind. Teo focuses his purple eyes onto the memory, recognizing the sheer scale of the historical disaster. The records detail how the human forces were completely caught up and slaughtered by the swarming demons during that fateful night. Back in the present study, the imposing Teo von Reinhofer sits firmly on his grand throne, looking directly at his son. Teo glares down, coldly stating that while one of his sons must eventually master the supreme black sword, he requires certain talent rather than mere probability. Rodwell bows deeply near the heavy wooden door, formally announcing that the young master has arrived for the meeting. Teo notes that the missing child's forest is a high-hazard zone that not even he fully knew how to clear safely. He explains that the family vassals spent months investigating the metrics out of pure skepticism, because they refused to believe a failure had changed. The patriarch commands his son to rise, fixing a hard, critical gaze onto his posture. Teo declares that it is his direct duty as the leader of the house to give proper credit where credit is due, even if it belongs to a good-for-nothing. He finishes his declaration by stating he has formally summoned Nox here today to discuss his official reward. Nox blinks in sudden surprise, wondering if his authoritative, stern father is setting up a calculated tactical trap. He narrows his purple eyes, carefully asking if the patriarch is genuinely offering to grant absolutely any request he desires. Teo stands tall and swears an absolute oath upon the long-standing history of the Black Sword to grant him whatever he wants. Nox hesitates in deep thought, fully aware that his father secretly suspects his body has been stolen by a demon. Teo adds a stern warning, trusting that his son won't make a completely foolish request that embarrasses the name of the family. Nox asks for some time to think the reward over, prompting Teo to give a firm nod of agreement. The next day breaks over the estate grounds as a carriage prepares outside the main courtyard pillars. Wearing her formal traveling gear, Talia smiles brightly and tells Nox that they will meet again at Eldine Academy. Nox looks back calmly, mockingly stating that they will only meet if she manages to become a full-fledged knight before then. He fires a sharp taunt, telling her that means not getting completely petrified the next time she catches sight of a super huge spider. Talia turns bright red and coughs in deep embarrassment, huffing that she will definitely return as a proper warrior. Her lead retinue formally bows to Nox, thanking the young master again for saving the young Miss's life inside the forest palace. Nox waves his hand dismissively, letting out a long sigh and telling them to stop bothering him and leave the estate already. He watches her retinue march out past the gates, wondering if he is slowly getting used to this strange second reality. His thoughts are cut short as a system window flashes a grim reminder that his terminal countdown has dropped to 146 days. He stares up at the cloudy sky, telling himself that he has absolutely zero time to sit around and rest in this body. A few days fly by before Rona checks his room, reminding him that he needs to select a new maid and servants for the upcoming academy term. A sharp knock hits the door as Rodwell steps inside, announcing that Eldine Academy has formally sent a new maid in training to introduce herself. A young woman with long, pale green hair steps forward into the dim lighting of his private quarters. She offers a polite bow, introducing her name as Gitri de la Villa. Nox activates his insight perk, prompting the system window to instantly map out her baseline attribute parameters. His eyes narrow as he reads her hidden monitoring status, confirming she has been explicitly ordered by Teo to spy on his daily habits. Nox rests against his chair and quietly reviews her stat sheet, knowing the family head is tracking his potential demon possession. He looks over at the doorway, reminding himself that his own admission to the prestigious academy is rapidly approaching. Rona watches them with wide eyes, nervously asking if he is truly happy about leaving the estate for the academy term. Nox smirks back, telling her to stop overreacting because he doesn't even have the luxury of time to bully her anymore. He notes that if he fails to increase his base parameters within the next 2 months, surviving the Cutthroat Academy will be completely impossible. He steels himself for the future arc, fully aware that he must perfectly play the role of the final villain, Nox von Reinhofer. Rona repeats her reminder about the servants right as a sharp sequence of knocks echoes against the wooden frame. Rodwell gestures to the entrance, presenting the newly arrived green-haired maid in training to the young master. Chitri steps up and delivers a formal greeting, introducing herself as his new exclusive assistant. Nox introduces his own noble title, locking his purple eyes onto her face as he runs through her tragic game lore. He reviews her system metrics, noting her stamina sits at 8, and her active-passive skill is locked as perfect housework. Chitri offers a bright, cheerful smile, causing Nox to quietly recall that her entire family line was brutally murdered by her uncle. He notes that beneath her bubbly exterior, her inner psyche is completely jaded and on the absolute verge of breaking down. He reflects on the supreme authority of his father Teo, who ranks as one of the most powerful and ruthless entities in the continent. A memory flashes of Teo privately meeting with Chitri in his study, telling her he has massive expectations for her assignment. The patriarch promises to support her family's succession claim if she successfully reports every single detail of Nox's daily movements. Chitri bows her head low in the shadow, firmly vowing to assist the young master with all her heart. The memory fades as Nox stares at the ornate doors of his quarters, fully aware of her dual allegiance. He recalls the harsh warning Teo delivered to her, commanding her to never dare forget who her true master is. Nox watches her adjust her collar sleeve, knowing she is actively carrying a secret monitoring device on her neck chain. Chitri grips the golden chain tightly in the courtyard, whispering to herself that she must not waver any further. Nox leans back against his pillows, reviewing the immediate threat of a live family spy occupying his inner chambers. He recognizes that Teo is testing whether his mind belongs to the original Nox, or if his body has been stolen by the demon Baal. He dismisses the anxiety, deciding that as long as his real player identity stays hidden, navigating Chitri's assignment is his primary focus. He plots his layout, remembering that while she isn't involved in the main hero plotline, she was originally meant to head her family. He reviews her dark history, recalling how her position was entirely stripped away after her uncle executed her parents. He watches her polish the furniture, noting that behind her cheerful smiles, her internal condition remains dangerously fragile. Nox stares down at his sheets, debating if altering her tragic storyline and saving her from her fate is the correct decision. He grips his hands tightly, fully aware that messing with the established timeline could place a lethal noose directly around his own neck. The next morning, Nox calls his mates together and bluntly announces that they are all heading out to hunt monsters within the territory. Rona lets out an absolute shriek of panic, while a calm Chitri steps forward and instantly accepts the command. Rona frantically barks at Chitri that she cannot just blindly agree to such insanity, but the green-haired maid maintains her composure. Nox cuts off Rona's complaints, coldly reminding her that she has used up all her leave and is strictly forbidden from taking a sick day. He flashes a smug smile and threatens to cut her annual salary in half unless she grabs a weapon and follows him out immediately. Chitri steps up and politely asks if she should formally update Rodwell about the departure before they begin their preparations. Nox gives an affirmative nod, declaring that he is finally free to move anywhere as they stride out past the perimeter gates. The maids scurry heavily behind his white coat as they push straight into the dense foliage of the estate woods. A few days of consecutive hunting fly by as the party tracks a nest of monsters deeper into the forest clearing. Nox tracks down the local monsters roaming the woods, keeping his focus forward to clean out the territory section. A system notification flashes to confirm that his black flame ring has successfully stolen a fraction of a Grey Wolf's life force. The interface logs that he has officially obtained 2 hours of lifespan, right as Chitri asks if he is starting to feel tired after an hour of hunting. Nox curses under his breath, realizing that because he is conserving his genius perception skill, the manual combat is dragging out way too long. He performs the time math, frustrated that spending an hour to kill a beast means his actual structural gains completely balance out to net zero. A sudden, dangerous howl shatters the canopy as Rona lets out a terrified shriek from the high brush. Nox stands firmly on the dirt path, grumbling that the limited number of local monsters in this vicinity is putting his life plan in severe danger. He surveys the thick, quiet thicket and commands the retinue to wrap up the hunt and return back to the mansion for today. Chitri offers an elegant bow, gently promising to prepare a warm bath at his exact favorite temperature the moment they arrive. Rona scurries up to frantically declare that she will personally clean up his room, desperate to keep her salary from dropping any further. Nox stops walking in a shaded clearing, turning his profile toward the green-haired maid in training. He locks a piercing purple gaze onto her face, flatly demanding to know who she truly serves in this house. Jitri tenses up in sudden shock, her cheerful mask completely vanishing as she stammers back in absolute confusion. Nox watches her posture freeze, recalling her hidden support genius status screen via his insight window. Jitri lowers her yellow eyes, quietly whispering that she cannot offer a direct explanation to him right now. Nox dismisses her immediate panic, calmly reassuring her that he has absolutely zero intention of interrogating her or forcing a confession. He fixes a serious look and states that he is actually thankful she didn't choose to offer a direct lie to his face. He notes that instead of trying to force fragile mutual trust, it is vastly more sufficient for them to simply make use of each other. He turns his back to the clearing, leaving her to process the pragmatic boundaries of their new strategic relationship. Later that evening, Rona aggressively corners Jitri near the laundry windows, loudly complaining about how harsh the young master is. Rona mimics his orders about training routines, while a thoughtful Jitri offers a polite, quiet chuckle in response. Jitri gazes out the glass pane, reflecting heavily on the rumors detailing how Nox completely crushed the twins to claim his academy right. She realizes that despite being labeled a failure, Nox is aggressively solidifying his standing within the cutthroat nobility. She grips her writing stylus firmly, resolving to follow his advice and make use of him to escape her own ruined family line. Shortly after, a malicious, groundless rumor begins to spread rapidly among the estate vassals regarding her background. The gossip whispers that Jitri was fully expelled from the Lavilia house and no longer deserves to serve as a Reinhafer maid. The text details how her uncle stripped away her direct line descendant rights, holding her parents accountable for fabricated crimes. Jitri slumps against the wall in isolation, letting out a painful sigh under the crushing weight of her family's disdain. The next morning, she forces her trademark bubbly smile back on, throwing open the door to greet the young master with a cheerful shout. Rona abruptly bursts into the hallway, grabbing Jitri's arm in a massive panic and yelling that she has been looking everywhere for her. Jitri blinks in surprise as Rona firmly clasps her hands, entirely oblivious to the malicious rumors running through the estate. Jitri looks down at their joined hands, wondering if the eccentric maid is simply mocking her or if she genuinely views her as a true friend. She smiles softly, concluding that in this bizarre courtyard, all of them are doing incredibly foolish things together. Inside the main study, Tio locks a stern gaze onto a newly arrived sealed letter containing the official Lavilia report. Nox watches from the shadow of the corridor, fully aware that the crimes framed upon Jitri's father are completely fabricated. He hesitates to act directly, deeply concerned about what unpredictable butterfly effect might be unleashed if he intervenes to save her. A few days later, the party pushes back into the deepest sectors of the estate woods to initiate another tactical hunt. Nox moves with silent precision through the brush, tracking the perimeter coordinates with a highly serious expression. Watching his fast forms from the high grass, Rona whispers to Jitri that the young master seems significantly less merciful today. Jitri nods with an uneasy look, right as Nox grips his sword hilt and senses a terrifying distortion in the surrounding air. Nox stops in his tracks, recalling the exact video game code dictating that a hidden boss monster spawns when 20% of local forces remain. He targets the clearing, hoping to farm the rare encounter to artificially boost his baseline parameters before his deadline. A violent buzzing sound shatters the silence as an immense shadow drops down from the canopy at hyper-fast speed. Nox narrows his purple eyes, instantly identifying the lethal high-tier creature as the elite king wasp. The giant insectoid drives its massive stinger down in a lightning-fast ambush, catching Nox completely off guard. Before Nox can pivot his blade to execute a block, Jitri leaves her flank and throws her own body directly into the path of the strike. A massive collision rocks the clearing, sending dust swirling across the path as Jitri takes a bloody hit to shield him. Nox stares in complete shock as she stumbles back, wondering why on earth a house spy would recklessly sacrifice herself to save his life. He grinds his teeth in a sudden fury, immediately commanding the interface to activate. Hour of the Genius, as the world grinds to a complete halt. Time grinds to a complete halt. trapping Jitri inside her own dark thoughts as she faces the battlefield alone. Nox's demanding question echoes through her memory as she fields her deep internal confusion over who she should serve. She flashes back to her uncle violently seizing control of her household, loudly declaring that her family now belongs completely to him. She reevaluates Nox's previous offer of a relationship based entirely on mutual utility, wondering how she should navigate her placement. Nox triggers his combat forms to shatter the elite King Wasp with a decisive physical impact. Nox instructs the bloodied maid to hang in there a while longer, promising special interface rewards for her survival. Jitri collapses heavily onto the dirt floor of the clearing, fading rapidly from the venom as the extraction units panic that it is all over, and they must rush back to the mansion immediately. Jitri sits up on the edge of her bed, dismissing her cheerful mask as she spots the dirt marks left on her skin. Nox listens closely to the system prompts, feeling a distinct wave of underlying anger rippling through the interface. Outside the quarters, the tracking squad reviews the investigation files, confirming the details of the letter are entirely true. The patriarch Tio locks a serious look forward, admitting he originally brought her to the estate solely to conquer her family line. The vassals plot their layout to force the successor's shaky position into total submission before any defensive plans can materialize. Tio agrees with his advisor's strategic observations, deciding they ought to deal with the maid's situation quietly on their end. A sudden crash echoes as a guard throws open the door to barge directly into the private meeting room without permission. The runner gasps out that Nox has personally carried the injured maid back from the hunt on foot. He frantically reports that Nox forcefully expended a hyper-expensive potion asset without any direct authorization from the house. The staff worries about what unpredictable variables might be triggered by Nox allowing personal feelings to dictate medicine usage. Jitri blinks open her green eyes, completely disoriented as she wonders what exactly happened to her body back then. Rona runs to her side, frantically explaining that the young master saved her life by illegally using a legendary mandrake antidote. She details that Nox explicitly cornered the medical staff to command her survival, leaving Jitri entirely stunned. Left alone, Jitri sinks into deep emotional turmoil, wondering why a man who claimed to just make use of her would execute such a move. Jitri demands to find her master, prompting Rona to explain that Nox went to look for the Chamberlain before ordering her to rest more. Rona exits the room with a determined stride to begin preparing the laundry logistics. Jitri slides out of the bed and slumps against the window frame, admitting to herself that she holds zero right to deserve a place anywhere. She pulls open an old golden pendant containing a miniature picture frame portrait of her dead parents. She sets the family heirloom down on the table alongside a note of gratitude to fully compensate for the cost of the potion. She steps out onto the stone ledge to flee the estate grounds, her hand gripping the structural railing. Nox intercepts her escape from the adjacent wall framework, fixing a piercing glare onto her face as he demands to know where she thinks she is going. He swings his boots over the ledge with an intense physical motion to cut off her path. A flashback details Rodwell trying to block the medicine deployment, claiming no servant can touch the supplies without the master's word. Nox targets the butler with an aggressive, freezing glare, coldly demanding to know if Rodwell holds a higher rank than him in this house. Rodwell cowers in immediate panic, stammering a formal apology as Nox resolves to handle the report to his father personally. Nox reviews the interface trackers, letting out a sigh of relief that the critical monster poison has been completely neutralized. Nox marches straight into the central study, prompting a serious Teo to note that it is rare for his son to come looking for him. Teo locks his gaze onto his son's dark uniform, flatly questioning if this sudden meeting is because of that maid. Nox activates his master of acting trait, fixing a perfectly serious look as he prepares to voice his direct demand. Nox activates. He looks his father dead in the eye and commands the patriarch to give the exiled G3 de la Villa directly to him. Teo lets out a slight, knowing smirk, realizing his son is attempting to initiate a major butterfly effect on the main storyline. Nox reflects on how her actions in the woods prove she has dropped her fake facade, giving him the true answer she withheld previously. He reviews her system profile data, fully confident that her underlying talent as a support genius is worth the strategic risk. Teo maintains his intense, serious profile before calmly delivering a direct answer of understood. Nox turns his profile around to exit, but pauses on the polished floor tiles to drop a final observation. He steps back toward the desk and tells the patriarch that this unworthy son has just one more thing to say. He glares through the dim light, his emotional state dropping his acting trackers as a red warning flashes across his sight. He commands his father to stop playing around and to completely quit toying with his people. He strides out into the grand hallway complex, leaving the throne room completely behind him. Back in the present room, Chitri lowers her eyes in deep distress, muttering that she is about to leave because there is no place for her here. Nox steps directly in front of her, intensely demanding where she thinks she is going, instead of assisting him as his maid should. Chitri breaks into a sudden, emotional shout, fiercely confessing that she was explicitly ordered by the patriarch to surveil his habits. She cries out that she has entirely deceived him, demanding to know why he is stubbornly trying to hold her back. Nox watches her raw outbreak, entirely unbothered as she stands trembling in her dark clothing. He notes to himself that this cynical side of her feels vastly more like a living person who is actively trying to struggle. He steps closer and answers that people deceive each other constantly. But Chitri screams back that she has committed a grave offense against him. Nox targets her with a confident smirk, asking if she truly thinks she can leave his service without repaying her massive medical debt first. He commands her to stay in this place, flatly stating that he uniquely needs the specific talents that she possesses. He locks his purple eyes onto her face and drops a final, definitive declaration. "So, I want you as my maid." Chitri breaks down in the center of the room, tears streaming heavily down her face as her defenses shatter. She lowers her head and formally vows that she will stay by his side until the absolute end to assist him. Nox answers with a calm nod of approval, entirely satisfied with the pragmatic layout of their new contract. He reminds her of his previous question regarding who she serves, prompting Chitri to fix an intense, serious gaze back onto him. She shifts her weight with a dynamic posture, completely locking her true allegiance to his front line. She looks out at the grand estate skyline, her expression entirely transformed into a serious, determined focus. Down in the courtyard, Rona gossips loudly to the other servants, joking about how the young master aggressively threatened the doctor. Nox steps out from the shadow of the pillar, coldly commanding Rona to completely refrain from insulting him right in front of his face. Rona covers her mouth in absolute horror as a smiling Chitri enters the yard to take over the heavy laundry duties. Nox lets out an exasperated sigh, completely exhausted by Rona's constant habit of causing ridiculous household trouble. Chitri sets down the linen baskets and openly voices that she is entirely tired of acting since she is no good at it anyway. Nox. Consideration. Her tired expression, admitting he prefers her being jaded because it completely eliminates the need for meaningless small talk. He reviews his layout parameters, knowing that being driven into a corner requires a relationship based strictly on raw, pragmatic utility. He fixes a confident smirk and locks his gaze forward, deciding that this arrangement is perfectly good enough for his immediate strategy. He returns to his private study and unrolls his ledger, preparing the physical transport assets for their upcoming departure. Chitri approaches his desk with a serious expression, alertly asking the young master if he is truly feeling all right today. She points out that a wave of highly negative rumors regarding his behavior has started to spread rapidly across the estate vassals. Nox scoffs at the warning, noting with an unbothered smirk that it is quite impressive for new rumors to outclass his already terrible reputation. Chitri lowers her gaze apologetically, explaining she was simply deeply concerned that the gossip might make his current position uncomfortable. Nox shrugs off her worry, reminding her that his baseline identity in this family has always been a lazy, incompetent good-for-nothing. Chitri narrows her eyes and intensely clarifies that the vassals are now whispering that he's an absolute pervert. Nox covers his face in sudden, comical distress, before silently rationalizing that his reputation has technically shifted into a capable brat. He considers his options, telling himself that he must carefully strike a balance to ensure his development tracks correctly. He grips his fist, reminding himself that Nox is designed to be a definitive villain whose primary narrative purpose is to help the main hero shine. He breaks his train of thought and commands her to drop the rumor topic entirely so they can focus on immediate business. He presents her with a new directive, stating that surviving inside the cutthroat Eldine Academy requires both of them to prepare. Jitri looks at him with intense green eyes, asking exactly what kind of specialized preparation he is talking about. Nox flashes a smug smirk, knowing her single-minded trait guarantees it is perfectly safe to share a fraction of his tactical plans with her. He explicitly outlines his progression path, commanding her to personally assist him in securing the necessary resources. Jitri lets out a slight sigh at his unrelenting drive before fixing a determined expression and voicing that she understands the directive. She promises to immediately source the basic tactical manuals that will benefit his training, proving her absolute competence as an assistant. The heralds announce that the family's second son, young Master Grain, has successfully returned home after graduating from the academy. Nox stands up with a sharp look, realizing this major plot event represents his absolute first opportunity to expand his lifespan. He shifts into an active posture, commanding Jitri to gather his deployment gear for the time being. Jitri bows her head low, her expression entirely serious as she prepares to follow him into the reception hall. The scene shifts directly to the grand courtyard pavilion, where the elite forces of the house are drawn up in rigid rows. Theo von Reinhofer stands at the head of the floor, formally offering a cold greeting to his second son for completing his academy term. Grain von Reinhofer steps forward into the light, bowing deeply as the interface locks his official profile data on screen. Nox runs through his meta-knowledge, recalling that Grain masks his lustful, materialistic traits to play politics and slide through content easily. He knows his brother used those manipulation talents to navigate the academy exams, which are notoriously difficult for ordinary warriors. He recalls that the entry testing requires passing consecutive physical and magical elimination rounds that crush thousands of applicants. Grain addresses the patriarch, formally announcing that he will be departing to the southern borders in exactly 3 days. Tio notes that traveling south during this season indicates he has received a mandated monster wave subjugation mission from the Crown. The interface displays the mapping metrics of Chaders, a barren, monster-infested neutral wasteland located right on the edge of the desert line. Grain looks out at his family, noting that when winter locks in, the entire southern sector is always flooded with elite creatures. Tio delivers a harsh parting command, sternly warning Grain to not dare bring any shame to the Reinhofer name during the campaign. Nox watches the interaction from the side of the hall, fully aware that this specific sub-story connects to several high-value reward grids. Nox steps directly out into the center of the pavilion floor, boldly interrupting his brother to ask if he can join the southern mission. Grain halts in complete surprise, loudly asking Nox if he has any actual comprehension of how dangerous the Chaders wasteland is. Grain locks an intense glare onto his younger brother, notes that he has heard the recent bizarre rumors about the forest conquest. He activates his insight metrics to analyze Nox's posture, trying to read his underlying physical development. Nox stands perfectly tall and answers with an entirely stone-faced expression that every single rumor regarding his victory is completely true. Grain lets out a dismissive scoff, flatly stating that he cannot permit someone who hasn't even entered the academy to join an official imperial mission. A sudden heavy voice drops from the high throne chair as Tio cuts into the argument, halting the dispute instantly. The patriarch fixes a piercing stare onto Grain and delivers a direct, absolute order to bring Nox along on the southern campaign. Grain gasps in complete shock at the command, while an imposing Teo states that the house will personally fund all the mission supplies. Nox maintains his calm posture as the formal double doors close, leaving the two brothers alone in the corridor. The scene transitions to the outer estate courtyard as the transport carriages are fully loaded for deployment. Nox walks down the stone path toward Jitri, casually thanking her for resolving a highly troublesome logistics issue. Nox! Jitri adjusts her ruffles and voices her concern, asking if his fragile physical body will genuinely be all right in the hazardous south. Rona abruptly bursts out of the barracks door, screaming his name in an absolute panic as she rushes over to intercept him. Rona fiercely demands to know why he is heading to a wasteland, while a calm Jitri steps up to voice her agreement with Rona's structural concerns. Nox stops their panic by flatly announcing that he is heading out on the subjugation march entirely without either of them. Jitri steps forward, shaking her green hair as she fiercely objects, and declares that she is marching alongside him regardless of the risk. She locks her gaze onto his face, reminding him that Rona's files explicitly show he remains exceptionally weak and prone to immediate illness. She intensely questions how on earth his fragile frame expects to survive such a long-distance journey completely alone without her assistance. Nox tenses up against a sudden wave of physical fatigue, forced to admit that her pragmatic reasoning makes complete tactical sense. He yields to her deployment request, commanding that she must strictly follow his orders and immediately learn how to ride Carl. Jitri proudly reveals she has already won over the undead beast by spending half her maid's salary on premium sugar cubes, leaving a crying Rona behind. Nox smirks at his pet's materialistic habits, declaring that the beast is just as unhinged as its master before ordering Rona to stay behind. He watches Rona's distressed expression as a sharp sequence of knocks hits the outer courtyard gate. A courier delivers a heavy chest, confirming it contains the premium combat supplies personally funded by the patriarch Tio. Nox inspects the gear, deeply suspicious as to why his cold father took his side during the dinner dispute. He enters the private inner armory, where the primary noble relic is displayed under intense lighting. He lifts the heavy cloth wrapper, revealing the legendary cursed weapon forged by the house's first patriarch. He stares at the massive, dark iron blade, checking his system files in an absolute, shocked realization. He notes that this unique, ancestral item never appeared a single time throughout his 27 game clears. A veteran player like him is completely stunned, desperately wondering why his father would hand down a completely unmapped hidden piece. Tio steps into the armory room, noting that the blade probably looks worn out, but confirming it has been his personal weapon for his entire life. Nox centers his stance and firmly asks what specific combat test he must execute to prove he deserves to wield it. The moment his bare hand grips the iron hilt, a violent burst of purple magical energy explodes entirely across his arms. He gasps out loud in extreme distress as the cursed blade instantly begins to absorb his underlying mana pool at a breakneck rate. Tio watches from across the table, nodding calmly as the metal weapon changes color from gray to a brilliant purple. The patriarch explains that the sword absorbs the baseline mana of its master to unleash its dark, elemental output several-fold. Nox drives his weight down, his vision flashing with system alerts as the sword's hunger outpaces his physical limits. A critical warning message screams that his internal mana pool has been completely exhausted by the weapon's draw. Nox curses his father's ruthless trap internally as the ancient script logs the formal name of the blade, Stormbringer. A massive pressure fills the room as the dark sword locks onto his physical life force to feed its discharge. The interface parameters map out Stormbringer's item block, logging its growth capacity from intermediate to advanced tier. A sharp chime confirms his mana is completely bottomed out, triggering an automatic system script to alter the weapon's energy source. The system forcefully initiates a life-to-mana conversion process, warning him that his remaining lifespan is now draining rapidly. Nox falls into a low, trembling stance, his body illuminated by the violent discharge of the dark sword. He lets out a furious shout, commanding the darn sword to quit stealing his life force before he collapses entirely onto the tiles. He lifts his head to glare at the weapon, completely stunned by the sheer malice of the ancestral artifact. The narrator notes that while the first patriarch used this cursed blade to build the family, it inflicts immense systemic harm on anyone who holds it. The records detail that 9 out of 10 elite mages collapse into immediate exhaustion, the exact microsecond they grip the hilt. Tio watches his son withstand the conversion script, reflecting on how Nox has been central to every major incident across the estate. The patriarch smiles to himself, confirming that the youngest son's breakneck development pace is far outpacing his highest expectations. He links the boy's baseline coordination to the legendary talent of a sword emperor, justifying his decision to test his limits. Tio notes that if Nox survives this trial, he holds the latent potential to grow into the greatest leader in the house's history. He locks his gaze onto his son's straining form, harboring a deeply dark, ultimate expectation for the boy's growth. The family head calmly acknowledges that Nox must grow powerful enough to eventually surpass and execute him on the future timeline. Tio steps forward and declares the trial over, announcing that the weapon officially belongs to him as a reward. Nox kneels on the stone floor, gasping for air, as the life-drain script finally detaches from his chest. He points his sword down and pants heavily, furious at the permanent damage dealt to his limited countdown tracker. He curses his father's cold utilitarian mindset, trying to steady his shaking hands before exiting the armory sector. We jump forward 3 days as the deployment caravan officially hits the road toward the southern border paths. Nox rides at the head of the column, his expression entirely locked into a dark, sour mood. G-Tree watches him from her horse, quietly wondering why he looks completely irritated despite securing his target subjugation mission. Nox grumbles to himself that he feels absolutely zero gratitude after having his precious lifespan points aggressively stolen by a cursed item. The column grinds to an absolute halt in a dense thicket as the scout units begin to clear the path. The forward knights lose their bearings entirely, pointing in completely opposite directions as they dispute the forest coordinates. Nox pulls up his mount next to a serious grain, entirely appalled that the scout team has managed to lose their way already. The lead tracker is Captain Ron, a local night order leader hired directly by Grain to navigate the wilderness. Nox lets out a loud, bitter sigh, openly labeling the circling scout teams as absolute incompetent buffoons. Grain alerts turns his head as a sharp crunch rattles the deep grass, warning Nox that they have accidentally marched straight into an ambush situation. Nox bluntly tells the navigator it is none of his business, noting that the scouts have completely lost their way on the trail. Nox steps forward and confidently states that he can get them there, entirely shocking the nearby guards. Grain mutters how ridiculous his brother is acting before Nox formally asks to be hired as the expedition's pathfinder. Grain feels deeply skeptical about the vassal's reports, realizing an arrival delay would quickly become a major problem for his reputation. Grain decides that if Nox fails, it will successfully break his brother's annoying confidence, so taking a minor detour might not be a bad idea. Grain tells Nox he will let him take the lead for now, prompting Nox to immediately point out the correct direction to the dense forest clearing. The party establishes a peaceful campsite for the night as a warm fire crackles in the center of the clearing. The hired knights panic, aggressively arguing over how a family failure could possibly uncover the correct path this rapidly. Nox reflects that, because South Chaders is a highly critical strategic content hub, he has personally cleared and explored this exact map grid more than a few hundred times. G-Tree approaches him by the campfire to ask how he found the path, causing Nox to point out the clear markings left on the ground. He identifies the tracks as an elite creature with a bear's body and an owl's head that natively inhabits the southern border. He notes, the beast species avoids camps out of fear, while the passing soldiers whisper that Nox is vastly superior to his academy-educated brother. Grain barks at his men to shut up before pulling aside his loyal retainer Schultz to check his brother's active combat limits. Grain prepares to test his strength, right as Schultz reveals he possesses the absolute perfect item to coordinate an ambush. Schultz smirks sinisterly, whispering that it is going to be an exceptionally long and dangerous night for Nox. The conspirators move further out into the dark woods to set up their underhanded plot against his sector. Nox rests against a tree trunk, breathing heavily as a sudden dangerous rustle echoes right outside his tent lines. Nox sits cross-legged in the shadows, calmly monitoring the incoming threat with complete focus. G-Tree alerts turn her head, but Nox commands her to remain completely inside the tent structure for the time being. G-Tree! Nox steps directly out onto the path as a heavy aura shatters the silence of the campsite. A massive blast echoes through the thick weeds as 4 giant ogres jump out to ambush his position. Nox stays low, realizing the soil surrounding his canvas was intentionally packed with female ogre pheromones. He recognizes that Grain used the ongoing mating season to lure the monsters here, to aggressively intimidate him. Nox readies his dark uniform and draws his cursed sword, causing Stormbringer to instantly fire up in response to his mana and will. A massive physical collision rocks the clearing as the ogre vanguard launches into a direct charge. Nox swings his blade in a lightning-fast arc, meeting the heavy assault with dense waves of purple magical energy. He drives his weight into the steel, parrying consecutive claw strikes with clean, rapid combat mechanics. The monsters let out agonized screeches as Nox unleashes a sweeping slash that completely severs their momentum. He maintains total control over his steel, precisely tracking the frantic movement of the beast through the high grass. The remaining ogres try to push back, but Nox closes the gap instantly with an intense, focused glare. He drives a final, explosive dark energy surge straight through the center of the monster line. The beasts roar out in pain as the dense purple shockwave completely breaks their physical structure. Nox shifts his weapon back, entirely relieved that the sword didn't recklessly devour his life force like it did in front of Teo. He notes with a smug smirk that the ancestral blade is moving easily in the exact direction he wants. He observes the clearing and notes that there is only a single monster left, standing on the field. Nox flatly states that he cannot allow the final creature to escape, launching into a swift, closing maneuver. He executes a rapid crosscut, driving his blade home to finalize the skirmish. A brilliant flash of magical energy ripples across the dirt path as the last enemy falls. The interface logs a massive text block, confirming he has successfully gained 1 day and 9 hours of lifespan after defeating the ogres. G-Tree runs out of the tent in a panic to check on his condition, prompting Nox to remind her that he told her to wait inside. He explains that Grain von Reinhofer intentionally used the ogre pheromones to organize an underhanded assassination attempt on their tent. G-Tree gasps in sudden realization, asking if his older brother is actively trying to keep him in check. Nox nods firmly and commands his undead pet Carl to go back to sleep, noting Grain used a cowardly scheme because he lacks Garen's absolute strength. He vows to let his brother know that such petty tricks won't work on him, mealing on the grass with a dangerous smirk. He asks G-Tree if she knows how to lure way more monsters to a target coordinate, channeling a dense pool of magic into his palm. Nox uses Ogre's blood to lure them directly to Grain's luxury camp, which causes a terrifying roar, violently shatters the midnight peace. Grain sits inside his tent and panics, completely unable to process why his custom mana detection crystal is suddenly exploding into a bright blue alarm. He wonders if the magic tool is faulty, since they are still at the forest entrance where no high-tier monsters should ever appear. A frantic guard throws open the flaps and screams for Grain to evacuate the perimeter immediately. Grain stands up in utter shock as a massive, furious wave of ogres crashes directly into his frontline defenses. He curses out loud in pure desperation, screaming that this is entirely the wrong zone for an ogre horde to manifest. The tents are ripped to shreds as the knights drag their injured across the ruined, blood-stained pavement. Grain corners his retainers in a fury, demanding to know if they accidentally planted the pheromone soil on top of his own tent canvas. A cowering scout stammers back in horror, confirming he definitely planted the bait exclusively on young Master Nox's tent. The next morning, Nox and G-Tree sit comfortably outside, with Nox commanding his maid to sit and eat directly alongside him. G-Tree notes, "It is bad for servants to dine with masters, but Nox states separate preparation is too troublesome during a live mission." G-Tree sighs that she must get used to his erratic habits, as the surrounding troops frantically pack away their blood-stained tents. G-Tree looks at the ruined camp and asks if they intend to step in and assist his brother's struggling vanguard. Nox holds his spoon and flatly refuses, confirming he has absolutely zero intention of saving them from their self-inflicted chaos. He notes to himself that he actively needs Grain's blunder to draw out more rampant monsters to feed his terminal life countdown. He finishes his meal and commands the party to immediately pack up their gear and depart toward the south. Suddenly, nearby a goblin is walking and is attacked by something from underground. The giant beast roars out as the party scrambles to establish a hasty defensive line against the threat. Nox notes that he has successfully grasped the local terrain layouts, alleviating his concerns regarding the distance to Chaders. Grain rides his horse alongside him, intensely demanding to know what he intends to do about the monsters tracking their tails. Nox flashes a confident look, noting that executing a large-scale subjugation grid right here is a perfectly viable strategy. The knights look back in confusion, flatly asking the young master why he keeps tapping his boots against the dirt floor. Nox answers with a slight smile, warning them to stay alert because elite monsters might break out from the ground at any given second. Right on cue, a massive explosion of loose earth completely rocks the center of the traveling column. The troops scream in terror as a gigantic, pinkish-red monster rises up to assault their flank. Nox centers his stance with a smug grin, identifying the incoming creature as the Worm. The system files log the beast as a highly durable, malformed dragon variant that has failed to fully develop its wings. He notes that while it cannot deploy high-level magic, its physical strength parameters remain notoriously devastating. Nox admits he intentionally lured the dragon out to farm its drops, knowing the soldiers would be in total shock if they uncovered his real plan. He barks a sudden order for everyone to drop their weapons and immediately hide inside the high bushes. The troops ask if he is insane, while Grain barks that they can easily shake the threats if they exit the woods quickly. Nox scoffs that he had absolutely zero intention of shaking the monsters from the start, leaving his position exposed. The scouts yell out in terror as the trailing ogre swarm crashes straight into the dragon's active combat sector. Jitri gasps that the entire ogre pack has caught up, but Nox calmly tells her there is absolutely zero need to be worried. He asks her if she knows what specific species the malformed dragon loves to eat, yet completely hates at the same time. Jitri stammers in confusion as Nox drops a final smug answer. It's ogres. The massive dragon worm immediately shifts its gaze, lunging forward with a gaping maw to rip the ogre vanguard apart. The two monster forces clash violently in a chaotic exchange of teeth and claws, ignoring the human forces entirely. Jitri watches with wide eyes, completely stunned to realize the creatures are actively slaughtering each other. Grain grinds his teeth in a panic, cursing internally as he wonders how Nox could possibly possess such deep tactical information. Nox capitalizes on the monster infighting, driving his sword forward to execute a fast cleanup maneuver. The troops ask why he is throwing rocks at the combatants. Right as a screen prompt logs his strength, stat has successfully increased. A secondary window confirms his life force has been extended by 8 hours for picking off the weakened survivors. The soldiers note that while Nox used the ogres perfectly, the dragon has successfully conquered the pack and remains standing. Nox stays low, commanding the archers to focus all fire and throw spears directly into the open mouth of the monster. The troops launch a coordinated volley, driving their weapons deep into the dragon's red scales. The worm lets out an agonized shriek as Nox steps up with a firm grip, declaring that it is officially his turn now. He activates his speed traits, driving his steel down in a devastating final strike through the dragon's core. A brilliant flash of purple energy shatters the brush as the massive creature collapses heavily onto the dirt path. The final system block logs a massive text block, confirming his lifespan has successfully been extended by 10 days. The tracking window updates to show his total remaining countdown rests at exactly 122 days. He notes with a sigh that his temporary blessing of growth multiplier has fully vanished, leaving his permanent stamina locked at 5. He centers his breath, telling himself that hitting a solid baseline of 5 stamina means his hard grinding is finally paying off. Jitri runs over to ask if he is hurt anywhere, but Nox dismisses her concern and commands the squad to quickly reorganize their layout. Suddenly, a secondary ground tremor rips through the trees as a second giant worm splits the earth. Nox blinks in surprise at the double spawn, right as a sharp voice commands him to get out of the way instantly. A figure drops down from the canopy at breakneck speed, slicing the dragon completely in half with a single sword slash. Nox locks his gaze onto the traveler, completely stunned as he wonders what this specific person is doing here. He monitors the stranger's combat posture, recognizing the legendary rogue warrior known across the realm as the Sword Genius. He brings up his index data, confirming the traveler's official elite profile identity is Paracelsus. Paracelsus sheathes his steel and mockingly asks if nobles don't offer a single word of thanks, prompting a furious guard to scream at his impudence. The traveler offers a casual wave, introducing his title and stating they can simply think of him as an ordinary mercenary. Nox panics internally, fully aware that the first encounter with Paracelsus is strictly designed to take place much later at Eldine Academy. He realizes his breakneck progression has triggered a severe timeline anomaly as the party continues their march down the forest trail. Grain pulls up his horse next to the mercenary, asking if his first destination stop is also the neutral zone of Chaders. Grain flashes a smug smile, offering to pay him handsomely if he signs under his command to subjugate the winter monster wave. Paracelsus peeks through his glasses, noting that while he is curious about the sons of the Supreme Sword Emperor Tio, he flatly refuses the contract. Grain's retainers bark at his rude tone, while Grain tells them to drop it, silently noting the mercenary's single-strike capability is worth capturing. Grain vows to recruit him into his circle, to successfully steal all the soldiers' strategic attention back from Nox. The few hours of riding fly by before the massive, weathered structures of Chaders loom over the desert horizon path. Nox looks out at the quiet town streets, noting the area feels significantly more desolate and ruined than in the original video game. The party dismounts their horses at the village gates, matching their coordinates with the local defense layout. Nox walks calmly past the perimeter lines, maintaining a completely serious and unbothered expression. Paracelsus marches alongside their rear guard, his clothes still stained with blood from the dragon slaughter. The local security chief steps forward out of the guardhouse to formally meet the incoming Reinhardt delegation. The chief identifies the two noble brothers, stating he was updated in advance regarding a mandated imperial subjugation mission. The leader admits he harbored great expectations for the proud family, but notes their reliance on standard noble tactics is a massive disappointment. He scoffs that they look like sheltered young masters, leaving Grain to glare back with an intense, irritated profile. Nox monitors the surrounding infrastructure, recognizing the city is entirely unable to stand its ground against the winter monster wave. Night settles over the outpost as the squires lead the horses to the stables and begin securing inn-rooms for the retinue. Paracelsus approaches Grain in the courtyard, flatly announcing that he is officially rejecting his recruitment proposal. An angry Grain demands to know if he intends to fight the monster wave entirely alone, but the mercenary simply wishes them a safe subjugation. Paracelsus reflects that rumors always follow the truly competent in this world, walking out past the wooden frames into the darkness. Nox watches him leave from his private quarters window, letting out a low, contemplative breath. Later that evening, Nox slips into the village slums, tracking down a group of shivering refugee children hidden behind the alleys. He casually asks if they want some food, reaching straight into his traveling bag to pull out fresh loaves of bread. He hands out the buns to the hesitant kids, telling himself that while he cannot save everyone, he must survive Chaders to build a future where people don't beg. He narrows his purple eyes, fully aware that this piece of land will become an exceptionally expensive strategic hub in the future storyline. G-Tree watches his charity from the edge of the forest clearing, smiling to herself as she realizes her master was simply acting cold in public. The next morning, the village leadership gathers the troops in the main courtyard to detail the upcoming campaign layout. The chief explains that Chaders is always overwhelmed in winter, which is why they continuously request reinforcement funds from the crown. Nox inspects the perimeter walls, flatly labeling their existing defensive structures as an absolute, terrible failure. He reflects that the sole reason he chose to protect this barren wasteland is because its underlying meta value is incredibly high. He notes the rampant monster count has significantly spiked this year, a hidden detail that will actually benefit the region's long-term value. The chief reveals some villagers have caught sight of a griffin, a severe update that completely heightens Grain's immediate anxiety. Nox asks for the exact location of the sighting, running through his game metrics regarding the king of the wilderness. He recalls that the griffin boss was explicitly designed to be strategically stopped rather than completely defeated on the map layout. The tracker points to the endless wilderness of the eastern desert, noting the beasts usually stay closer to the borders of Tahalan. Nox shifts his gaze toward the village center, telling himself he has a good guess on who the local trader is and intends to cut out the most rotten part of the village first. Meanwhile, Grain's bitter retainer, Schultz, grinds his teeth in a fury, realizing Nox's navigation achievements have caused him to completely fall out of favor with his lord. Schultz spots G-Tree carrying supplies near the village fences, mockingly noting that since she has been stripped of her title, she no longer holds any noble protection. He signals his subunits, sneaking up behind her position to launch a calculated, private ambush. Schultz blocks her path with a confident smirk, prompting a serious G-Tree to ask if he has any actual business with her. Schultz lays out his trap with an arrogant grin, demanding that the two of them step aside to have a quiet little chat alone. Schultz steps past the village fencing to corner G-Tree, trying to force an interaction by asking what is wrong. He tries to downplay his aggressive advances by claiming that since they are both knights serving powerful masters, they operate on the same level. G-Tree panics internally, realizing that violently rejecting Grain's personal retainer will cause Nox to completely fall out of favor with his older brother. She fears her master will suffer severe backlash and draw dangerous, unnecessary attention from the rest of the noble family line. Schultz smirks and arrogantly offers to pay for whatever she wants if she simply complies with his demands. Suddenly, a heavy, cold pressure fills the entire corridor, causing the arrogant retainer to let out a sharp grunt of pain. Nox materializes directly from the dark shadows with a drawn blade, coldly commanding Schultz to speak up now. Schultz stumbles back onto the stone pavement, panting heavily as he frantically demands to know what the boy thinks he is doing. Schultz tries to salvage his pride, loudly questioning if Grain will stand by and let a family failure execute such a blatant assault. Nox steps into a low stance, entirely unbothered as he questions if the trash is trying to threaten him, using his brother's name. He drives his steel forward with an explosive, blinding flash, instantly cutting Schultz down right in the middle of the courtyard. Nox looks down at the remains, flatly stating he isn't the type of person who loses his focus just because an influential family stands behind his name. He locks a piercing purple gaze onto the remaining guards, coldly telling them that they are the ones who don't know their place. The surviving forces break out into a total panic, screaming for the others to run as they witness the absolute slaughter. Grain rushes onto the bloody scene alongside his retinue, completely horrified as he asks if his brother genuinely just executed his primary knight. Nox stands perfectly tall over his steel, casually confirming the kill without a single shred of hesitation. Grain screams in a total fury, but Nox calmly shuts him down, noting his brother has gotten the entire sequence of events completely wrong. Nox demands to know why Grain is barking about punishment instead of asking for the explicit details of what occurred first. He steps forward, declaring that as G-Tree's true master, it is impossible for him to stand by and watch his personal people be targeted by local trash. Grain scoffs in disbelief, asking if he truly executed a top-tier family asset over a trivial servant issue. Grain fiercely demands to know if his brother can actually take full responsibility for the political fallout of his actions. Nox responds by instantly unleashing a massive, crushing wave of purple dark mana that floods the entire stone hall. Grain stumbles back in absolute terror, entirely unable to process how his supposedly frail, good-for-nothing younger brother possesses such monstrous talent. Nox tells his trembling brother that he has zero interest in waiting around or reporting his movements to underlings. He dictates the immediate terms, telling Grain to leave the final settlement for their patriarch, Tio, to decide once the southern deployment concludes. Grain watches his brother walk away, panicking internally over how the boy managed to become this powerful behind their backs. He stares intensely at the dark hilt of Stormbringer, realizing he must not dare underestimate Nox during the remainder of the subjugation mission. Nox checks on a trembling G-Tree as a chilling wind whips through the outpost, noting that his actions will quickly trigger a massive ruckus among the troops. He notes the expedition. Soldiers are already splitting into separate internal factions and must choose whether to follow Grain or stay out of the way. G-Tree bursts into heavy tears, frantically asking her master if he will truly be all right after making so many high-profile enemies. She weeps that this matter will place his life in severe danger, entirely terrified for his immediate safety inside the family network. Nox firmly cuts off her panic, reminding her that his public cover is an unyielding, arrogant villain who doesn't care about diplomatic consequences. He commands her to never dare bow her head to anyone, reinforcing his identity as the good-for-nothing of the Reinhardt family. G-Tree wipes her face and bows her head, promising to bear his absolute command in mind as they move out. Nox firmly cuts off her panic, reminding her that his public cover is an unyielding, arrogant villain who doesn't care about diplomatic consequences. He commands her to never dare bow her head to anyone, reinforcing his identity as the good-for-nothing of the Reinhardt family. G-Tree wipes her face and bows her head, promising to bear his absolute command in mind as they move out. Meanwhile, Grain sits by a candle flame in deep thought, trying to convince himself that Nox's weapon looking identical to their father's sword is a mere coincidence. He tells his retainers they must stay completely wary of the boy, unable to process how Nox knows the terrain grids better than trained scholars. Grain groans over spending money on a sloppy navigation team, resolving to make use of the remaining night order to clear out local bandits. He orders his sub-captains to execute a thorough sweep of the vicinity before the main monster wave initiates. He commands his scouts to immediately report back to him if Nox attempts to move out or execute any further strange activities. Later that evening, Nox slips past the barracks to inspect the village defense lines, noting the brick structures are barely standing. He changes direction entirely, telling his escort that he is heading into the slums to recruit an elite new person for his active team. He targets a dilapidated alleyway, explaining that even a small, ruined outpost like this contains a hidden genius character. He utilizes his veteran game files, tracking down the exact coordinates of a fabled half-elf potion maker named Alina. The escort stammers in complete confusion, unable to understand why a master alchemist would be hidden inside such a shabby, wet cellar. Nox notes that securing her through this specific hidden route is the only way to prevent her from working for a rival foreign empire in the future arc. He commands his squad to follow his footsteps closely down the stone corridor so they don't lose their footing in the dark. Deep inside the underground room, a voice mutters in self-pity, wondering how a master could end up stuck drinking inside such a place. Nox steps into the dim light of the cellar, calmly announcing that he has finally found his potion maker. Alina lets out an absolute shriek of horror, demanding to know why on earth noble warriors have violently breached her private hideout. She covers her face and stammers a frantic apology the moment she recognizes the expensive crests on their cloaks. She crosses her arms defensively, muttering that she had zero comprehension that they belonged to a reputable dark family line. Nox pulls up her base profile via his insight menu, reviewing her high-tier wood element metrics and massive developmental potential. He maps out her positive attributes alongside her extreme negative trait as a severe drunkard. Nox dismisses her flaws, knowing a failure like him cannot afford to be picky when trying to lock down a legendary alchemist. He cuts straight to the point, stepping up to the wooden counter to directly confront the purple-haired girl. Nox issues a flat command for Alina to join his retinue, promising to give her exactly what she needs the most if she complies. Alina lowers her eyes and flatly refuses his offer, whispering that she has a critical personal objective she must finish here. Nox smirks, using his meta-knowledge to ask if her sudden refusal is related to her captive childhood friend, May. Alina gasps in total shock, her face turning entirely pale as Nox confidently vows that he can easily save the girl from her fate. He asks if he has successfully changed her mind, fully aware that the system lord dictates May is scheduled for an immediate execution by the local syndicate. He extends his hand and locks the contract, commanding her to join his force in exchange for a complete prison rescue. A flashback traces May's sacrifice, where local corrupt forces violently raised the village taxes and dragged the innocent orphan away. Alina recalls her own helplessness during that fateful night, weeping that she wishes she had been the one dragged off by the soldiers instead of her only friend. She tracks the painful memory, knowing her own baseline alchemy skills were entirely insufficient to mount a solo rescue against the syndicate fortress. She doubts Nox will be successful. She accepts that she will never forget her friend's sacrifice. Next, we shift directly into the enemy stronghold, where Nox is getting ready to clap back at these backstreet boys. Deep inside a stone vault, the corrupt Ron laughs with his crew about how easily they manipulated Grain's arrival. The thieves boast that they successfully posed as a legitimate night order, allowing them to steal local imperial funds without triggering any suspicion. Ron holds up his stolen noble badge, plotting a massive payout by capturing Grain as a literal hostage. The bandits toast to their grand plan, confident that the Reinhardt family won't be able to execute a countermeasure in an enemy nation surrounded by desert sand. He states, this wasteland has been entirely abandoned by the imperial family, meaning they can easily escape to live a luxury after the hostage trade. He rallies his men, shouting that no matter how influential the Reinhardt crest is, the family is completely powerless across these border coordinates. A masked scout tries to warn them about Nox, but the bandit captain dismisses the boy's strength as an unnecessary concern. The thieves laugh and down their drinks, completely unaware that their stronghold parameters have already been breached. Suddenly, the lanterns cut out completely, plunging the underground hall into total darkness as the thieves scream in panic to find out who turned off the lights. A sudden splash of blood paints the masonry as the bandits frantically realize a lethal enemy has materialized right in their midst. Nox launches into a high-speed solo raid, his steel ripping through the defensive lines with visceral, rapid-fire action. The guards are sent flying into the brick walls, completely crushed before they can even draw a weapon or raise a parry. Ron springs up from his seat in utter shock, aggressively demanding to know what kind of monster has breached his inner sanctum. Nox steps into the torchlight with a cold look, flatly labeling the entire syndicate crew as nothing more than absolute vermin. He drives his sword forward, coldly asking how low-life thieves found the balls to attempt to rob the Reinhardt family. Nox maps out the entire criminal layout aloud, detailing how Ron misappropriated local funds alongside the corrupt mastermind Taigan while using grain to secure bigger operations. The cornered warlord spits blood and changes his tactics, desperately offering to help Nox eliminate grain to advance his own noble family standing. Ron begs him to look away just this once, claiming there is zero reason for Nox to take an unnecessary physical risk. Nox scoffs at his pathetic bargaining, noting the idiot is spouting total nonsense while leaking a heavy murderous intent. An enraged Ron commands his remaining elite units to execute a direct, synchronized assault to crush the boy. Nox engages the entire vanguard single-handedly, shifting his weight to parry consecutive steel blades with rapid, clean mechanics. He drives his dark sword through the center of the line, completely shattering their coordinates with dense explosions of magic. Ron steps into the combat zone to unleash his signature martial art, screaming that the young brat is completely finished. Nox meets the attack head-on, his eyes flashing as he notes the warlord is far more simple-minded than he originally expected. Nox channels a heavy mana burst, using his swordsmanship genius to instantly dismantle and override the incoming technique. Ron gasps in complete horror as his ultimate strike is broken, entirely unable to comprehend how a noble kid stopped his fabled style. Nox steps over the debris with heavy boots, mockingly asking the thief leader how he dares to question what his conqueror wants. A glowing interface window flashes a milestone alert, confirming Nox has successfully learned the fabled southern sword technique right in the middle of the execution strike. He drives his steel down to slice the warlord to pieces, entirely satisfied that his genius copy mechanics secured exactly what he wanted. As the blue energy wave shatters Ron's strike, the system interface confirms that Nox has successfully integrated the southern sword technique. Nox stands perfectly still amidst the blood splatters, letting the technical mechanics of the skill settle into his thoughts. He quieted his breathing, his inner consciousness sliding back to the absolute fundamental question he has faced since transmigration. Deep inside his own mind, Nox reflects on the true meaning of a genius, remembering how many times he asked himself this during his 27 runs. He smirks, knowing the sword techniques he'll be learning in the future. This one might not be much, but it will be enough for them. The attack slices all of the captain's henchmen in one blast. Ron pants heavily as he states that this specific southern sword technique took more than 10 years of his life to master. Nox channels a heavy blue energy wave across his frame, leaving the defeated bandit captain completely frozen in sheer horror. Ron shivers on the floor, desperately screaming that if Nox kills him here, Taigan has already heard what he did and won't let him get away with it. Nox tells him not to be ridiculous, because there are 0 alive witnesses left to tell the tale, flatly announcing that he is simply assassinating them. Ron panics in utter disbelief. Right as Nox fixes a cold purple glare and declares that if no one survives, the world will only think this was an assassination. Nox steps forward through the dark passage to locate the hidden cell block where Alina's captive friend May is held. He shatters the heavy metal restraints to fully liberate the chained orange-haired orphan from her captivity. May pants heavily, remembering how the syndicate bosses mockingly told her she had 0 choices left and couldn't even be sold off to other nobles. She tracks her past failures at the orphanage, recalling how the supervisors told her a lowly person like her could do nothing but struggle on the ground. She remembers failing her magic trials, vividly flashing back to when her instructors told her she got the mixture entirely wrong. The alchemists had flatly told her she simply didn't possess any natural talent in this area before handing her a glass vial. She had fully accepted that she possessed 0 talent in alchemy, swordsmanship, or anything else for that matter. However, she knows that Alina was completely different. A true prodigy whose master openly declared he had nothing left to teach her. The orphanage monitors had sighed that if only the half-elf girl belonged to a noble family instead of being a war orphan, her skills would change the world. May recalls how Alina constantly shined brightly, leaving her helplessly envious of her friend's natural light. Despite her deep envy, May chose to step forward and sacrifice herself so that she wouldn't become a heavy structural burden to Alina. She had resolved to face death alone, screaming internally for the guards to stop trying to harm her brilliant friend. The emotional memory fades as Nox triggers his system props, completing the hidden route parameters of the prison block. Nox drags her up out of the stone dungeon cells to execute a swift extraction back to the village camp. Nox steps directly into the core underground lair where the corrupt regional boss Taigan is stationed. Taigan looks up from his stone chamber, calmly asking the blood-splattered intruder what brings a noble to his hidden layout. Nox draws his steel and fixes a stone-faced glare forward, coldly announcing that, by the law of the imperial family, Taigan will be executed. Taigan lets out a smug laugh, labeling the execution threat as a highly unfortunate mishap, before asking if the boy truly came here alone. Nox firmly answers with a single word of yes, prompting a confident warlord to state that the young master has severely underestimated his power. Taigan mockingly asks if a single kid thinks he can defeat him alone, but Nox calmly answers that he doesn't see why not. Taigan loses his patience entirely, aggressively screaming for his remaining syndicate units to launch a direct strike and kill him. Nox intercepts the charging vanguard head, his ancestral sword cutting through the enemy lines with visceral, rapid-fire action. The interface logs an active tracking timer, displaying his current skill modifier count on screen as exactly 457. He drives his weight forward to execute a crushing parry, his system threshold dropping down to 4056. A final, purple magical shockwave shatters the room as the skill countdown locks strictly at 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Back at the cellar safe house, Alina blinks in total shock as she turns around to discover her missing childhood friend standing right before her. She calls out May's name in heavy tears, completely unable to process how her execution timeline was successfully rewritten. May runs forward to tightly embrace her sobbing friend, assuring her that everything is completely over now. A flashback details the final moments of the raid where the regional chief Taigan collapsed onto the stone tiles. Nox had locked a piercing gaze onto the bleeding warlord, coldly warning him not to dare think he would die that easily. Taigan groaned in absolute agony as the dark sword technique completely tore his physical structure to pieces. He gasped for air through the blood splatters, completely petrified by the overwhelming combat genius of the kid. The defeated leader let out a final cry of total disbelief, screaming internally over how the great Taigan could possibly lose to a mere noble brat. The flashback shatters as Nox reviews his system logs, remembering how many times he questioned what it means to be a real genius. He looks down at his blade. At that moment, I asked myself that question again. Nox staring at Taigan on the floor. He brutally finishes off Taigan and sheathes Stormbringer, fully satisfied that his high-risk gambit secured a legendary alchemist. The perspective shifts straight to the village inn, where the remaining noble caravan has established its secure quarters. A deeply shaken Taigan cannot believe he just lost to a brat, as he experiences a mandatory near-death flashback. He grinds his teeth, remembering his father's harsh lesson that overwhelming strength allows a person to rule everything. A young Taigan doesn't understand, as he watches his dad physically abuse his mom. If you possess overwhelming strength, you can get away with doing anything. That's the law of a city on the borders of the Archive Empire. Are you the strongest person on the continent? The only reason Taigan's father survived is because he hasn't fought any geniuses and warns Taigan not to fight them either. He recognizes Nox as one of those unreachable geniuses his father warned him about, making competition an entirely losing battle with him. Nox stands silently under the dim lighting as Taigan realizes that a genius is to be so talented that no one can reach you. Taigan realizes that the only reason he is dying is because he chose to fight with Nox. Nox unemotionally finishes of Taigan. The half-elf girl wraps her arms around her friend in a tight embrace, sobbing out that she thought May had left her forever. Alina wipes her eyes and asks where their noble savior is, prompting May to explain that Nox is currently wrapping up the situation. G-Tree watches them with a gentle smile, confirming that the young master's public coldness never matches his true strategy. The memory fades back to the silent inn quarters, where the heavy confrontation between the two brothers locks in. An irritated Grain snaps, demanding to know how long his younger brother intends to keep him waiting on this road. Grain suppresses his rage, looking directly at his younger brother who just walked in the room, as a heavy silence fills the space. He maintains his serious glare, firmly stating that he has an exceptionally important matter to discuss. Grain gestures directly to an empty wooden chair, sternly commanding Nox to take a seat for a moment. Inside the grand hall of the Reinhafer family, reports arrive confirming that young Master Nox has successfully cleared out the deep-rooted corruption inside Shaders. The report notes that Nox handed out harsh punishments to the corrupt, but the messenger admits he cannot decipher the mysterious, separate reward the young master is demanding. While Shaders was once ignored by everyone for simple reasons, the strategic reality of the region is far more complicated than it appears. The eastern border of Shaders serves as the final line of defense, meaning its fall would let monsters swarm the Central Empire, which forces the government to pour massive funds and troops into its defense. Even though this harsh wasteland has absolutely no intrinsic value, it cannot be abandoned because of its critical defensive position. The local threat is so severe that even Nox's brother Grain would struggle against them, especially if the notorious Ron bandits launch an attack. Patriarch Theo coldly remarks that anyone unable to survive such a threat is unworthy of the Reinhafer name before shifting the focus back to Nox. Theo points out that Nox is far too selfish to clear out corruption for free and questions why he is specifically demanding governing authority over the Shaders wasteland. The advisor is stunned that Nox is willing to give up his birthright as the youngest son if he fails, asking Theo if he will reject such a risky proposal. Theo accepts the terms, eager to see if Nox can actually defeat the massive threats occupying the land. Theo orders his aide to proceed with the arrangement, giving the young master his chance to succeed or fall. Theo ponders Nox's true intentions, wondering just how many steps ahead his terminally ill son is actually planning. Theo wonders what kind of ultimate endgame Nox is trying to orchestrate. Meanwhile, Grain stands in disbelief as he learns that his own subordinates, Ron and Tygan, were planning to assassinate him. Grain is furious that his trusted men used him to leech off the family, completely blind to their betrayal until Nox exposed them. However, Grain realizes that Nox is the real danger here, especially when Nox smugly asks if he is terrified of him. Forcing down his pride, Grain grits his teeth and accepts that he has absolutely no choice but to take Nox's deal. When Grain asks what he wants, Nox compliments his brother's quick calculations and demands full command of Grain's troops. Grain reluctantly accepts the conditions, demanding that Nox guarantee his survival and yield the credit for the operation to him. In exchange for his life being spared, Grain is forced to surrender all mineral rights and precious artifacts from his massive mine. Nox seals the deal with a cold smile, warning Grain to avoid doing anything rash. Later, inside the workshop, Elena stares at the rare ingredients, realizing she has never successfully brewed a corroding potion before. Despite her doubts, Elena resolves to make the impossible potion, even though the others warn that Nox's hunt is suicidal. Nox calmly tells his trembling subordinates not to be afraid, understanding exactly why they are terrified of facing a legendary beast. Unable to reveal that he needs the Griffin's hearts to extend his dying life, Nox orders them to stop questioning his commands and focus on preparation. Defeating the Griffin so early in the timeline is something no player has ever pulled off. Nox confidently claims that he is the sole exception, pointing to a map to explain his secret, hidden route to the beast. He carefully outlines the coordinates, ensuring every detail of their movement is flawlessly timed. Backed by his knowledge of clearing the hardcore game 26 times, Nox is certain of his victory. He reminds himself that the immense, game-breaking rewards from this early raid are absolutely essential for his survival. In this brutal fantasy world, he knows he must put his life on the line if he wishes to escape his terminal illness. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the earth as massive stone rubble collapses around them. Monsters swarm the canyon, prompting Nox to order his troops to stand ready for battle. Nox issues a strict warning that they will only get one shot at executing this plan perfectly. He steps forward as the sole strategist who can navigate the deadly trial. When Jitri begs him to reconsider the highly dangerous raid, Nox commands her to trust her master. Nox promises her that he will not die, remembering the exact moment his struggle against fate began. He charges forward, his sword igniting with bright, explosive, magical energy. Knowing he is terminally ill, Nox ignores his failing lungs and leaps into a dark corridor, slashing his sword through the heavy air. He targets a giant iron golem, slamming his glowing blade directly into its stone core. A massive shockwave shatters the construct, and the system alerts him that his sword technique proficiency has increased. Wave after wave of feral monsters rush his position, snarling with bloodlust. Nox coldly orders the beasts to become his stepping stones, driving his blade straight through their bodies. Blood splatters across his cheek as he channels his mana, releasing a massive dome of purple light. Heavy wings beat against the wind as the colossal, white-crested griffin finally lands right in front of him. Staring directly into the beast's aggressive yellow eyes, Nox asks if they are ready to begin. Up on the fortress walls, the observing troops gasp as Nox moves like a dark blur against the monster's claws. The soldiers shout in amazement, unable to keep up with his blinding speed as they wonder what kind of monsters the Reinhards really are. G explains that the family is famous for its deadly internal conflicts to inherit the legendary Black Sword. Despite his intense, painful headaches, G insists that Nox has deep, personal reasons for ignoring his awful reputation. Hearing this, the other soldiers begin to realize that the rumors painting Nox as a weak fool are completely false. G asks everyone to keep quiet and play along with Nox's act, ensuring his secret strategies remain hidden. They eagerly agree to keep their lips tight, just as a massive shockwave erupts from the battle below. Down in the dirt, the griffin shrieks in fury as Nox parries another bone-crushing strike. Staring up at the monster's massive wings, the soldiers wonder if Nox can actually slay such an absolute nightmare. Nox gets thrown backward, spitting blood on the ruined pavement as he struggles to catch his breath. Grain takes command of the defensive line, ordering all troops to wait until the beast is within short range of the fortress walls. He yells for his men to prepare the heavy ballistas, ready to fire the moment the signal is given. The sky splits as the griffin dives, unleashing massive wind currents that tear up the ground. Nox dodges a devastating claw strike, watching the beast descend back into the clouds. Nox realizes that they must neutralize the griffin's ridiculous flight ability if they want to stand any chance of killing it. Downing the metallization potion, Nox hardens his body, relying on his thorough preparations to survive the impact. He recalls Grain's initial outrage when he was ordered to construct the ballistas for the hunt. Nox had coldly given his brother a choice, either build the ballistas or face the legendary monster alone on the front lines. Nox smiles, knowing Grain's sharp self-preservation instincts make him a highly effective pawn. The griffin lets out a massive shriek as it circles back down, completely unaware of the trap. Nox taunts the beast, asking if it is feeling frustrated because its attacks are completely failing. Suddenly, a massive ballista bolt sails through the air, piercing straight through the monster's wing. Nox smiles, explaining that the bolt was coated in Alina's highly concentrated poison that will melt its insides in 5 minutes. Declaring that 5 minutes is all he needs, Nox prepares to finish the weakened beast. Refusing to let his terminal illness claim him today, Nox unleashes a devastating wave of sword strikes. Nox roars, Grain's name, signaling his brother to order the final barrage. Grain bellows the order to fire, sending a volley of massive bolts slamming into the monster's chest. Exploding mana illuminates the canyon as the final, desperate struggle begins. Grain watches in horror as the poison-maddened griffin lashes out blindly with its claws. Nox channels every ounce of his remaining mana, unleashing his ultimate technique, Black Execution. A massive arc of dark energy slices cleanly through the air, severing the monster's wing and sending blood raining onto the pavement. Nox lands heavily on his feet, spitting blood on the ground as the massive construct of the griffin collapses. He plunges his sword directly into the beast's chest, delivering the final, fatal blow. Dust settles over the battlefield as the colossal beast finally falls completely silent. The system window flashes, congratulating Nox on extending his remaining lifespan to 179 days. Grain is completely speechless, staring at Nox in sheer terror and calling his younger brother an absolute monster. He realizes that only a high-ranking academy professor should be capable of such a feat, forcing him to acknowledge Nox's terrifying strength. Clutching his hands in frustration, Grain accepts that he must stay on the right side of this terrifying sibling. He quickly offers to handle the transport of the griffin's massive corpse back to the fortress. Grain tells his brother to go and get some rest, leaving Nox completely surprised by his sudden cooperative attitude. Back in his private chamber, Nox chuckles at how badly he terrified his brother before turning his focus to the hidden clear rewards. He examines the legendary Griffin's Heart, a high-grade wind attribute item capable of being brewed into a stat-boosting elixir. Nox shows the heart to Alina, stating he has no time to waste and needs the wind elixir brewed immediately. When Alina warns that her current tools will make the brewing process take too long, Nox promises to provide her with everything she needs. Nox then offers to officially hire both Alina and Jatri as servants of the Reinhardt family, leaving the commoners completely stunned. He explains that he only cares about their useful talents but strictly warns them that he will never tolerate betrayal. Staring at her new master's absolute conviction, Alina resolves to prove her genius by successfully crafting the elixir. They accept the offer with a deep bow, officially joining Nox's personal faction. Walking down the corridor, Jitri admits that Nox is completely different from the terrible rumors painting him as a selfish monster. She asks him to make one promise, that if things ever get too difficult or painful for him, he will seek their help. Nox silently processes her concern before agreeing to hold up his end of that promise. "Mole!" He tells them to pick up the pace to avoid catching a cold in the freezing night. Unfortunately, his terminally ill body fails him, and the system immediately slaps him with a level 2 cold, prompting an annoyed sigh. The carriage arrives at the main family estate, carrying the exhausted young master. Onlookers whisper in disgust, assuming the notorious playboy simply couldn't help but bring more women back to his estate. Nox ignores the rumors, but his thoughts are interrupted by an aide informing him that the patriarch has requested an immediate private meeting. Steel-nerved and prepared, Nox heads deep into the main manor to face his father. Theo greets his son, his intense purple eyes locking onto Nox as he enters the grand office. Theo admits he heard of Nox's incredible contributions to the Chaders campaign. Nox is surprised to hear that even Grain actively defended and acknowledged his abilities to their father. While Nox wonders what his brother is plotting, Theo cuts the small talk, stating he called him for a far more serious matter. Praising Nox for accomplishing an impossible task and bringing honor to the family name, Theo prepares to fulfill his side of the promise. Sliding a sealed document across the desk, Theo declares that the Chaders region officially belongs to Nox. Nox accepts the document, but the heavy silence in the room suggests his father is not done speaking. Suddenly, Theo drops a bombshell question, asking if Nox is interested in taking his seat as the head of the family. Stunned, Nox curses internally, wondering why the patriarch is suddenly testing his ambitions so aggressively. Meanwhile, far across the kingdom, the news of the Griffin's sudden death spreads rapidly. The magical tremors at the beast's fall leave the local rebel factions in absolute shock. The rebel leaders realize the Reinhofer family has officially begun their march on the border. Kremser is ordered to prepare for war, driven by a deep hatred for the family that stole everything from them. Kremser accepts the command, ready to launch a bloody retaliation. They whisper that the day of their violent reckoning is drawing near. They plot to seize control of the entire kingdom the moment their secret, sleeping weapon finally awakens. Back inside the silent manor office, the tense conversation between father and son continues. The advisor remarks that such a heavy position is far too early for Nox, but Theo firmly disagrees. When the advisor argues that the first young master is a far better choice, Theo coldly snaps that he is not the one who decides. Nox calmly reiterates that he does not desire the patriarch position, prompting Theo to ask if his own son actually fears the throne. Theo relents, stating he will respect his son's opinion for the time being. However, he warns Nox that brilliant talent cannot be hidden, and weak people will constantly test him to find his limits. Theo dismisses his son, telling him to rest after his long and exhausting journey. Outside the office, Jitri anxiously asks if the patriarch scolded him, but Nox reassures her that the meeting was nothing to worry about. He adds that the old man didn't offer anything he couldn't refuse, before asking if the proper accommodations for Alina have been prepared. When Jitri modestly states she was simply doing her duty as a maid, Nox muses that if the world had simple rules, people wouldn't have to fight so hard. He warmly praises her for her great work, prompting Nox to wonder if it is finally time to get serious. The grand gates of Eldine Academy, the continent's most prestigious night mage training institution, loom in the distance. Back in the office, Theo admits to his advisor that conversing with his youngest son is surprisingly difficult. Theo explains that Nox does not fear him or the throne, but is instead staring down a far more fundamental fear, death itself. He wonders why his son is so deeply consumed by the fear of death at such a young age. The advisor suggests that the tragic loss of Nox's mother was a massive shock, leading Theo to wonder if his son blames him for her passing. Theo realizes his son is preparing to make an even bigger move on the political stage. He envisions the coming tide of chaos, knowing his son must grow strong enough to face the storm. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious dressing room, a young noblewoman excitedly holds up another beautiful gown. Nox's fiancé asks her maid Emma how she looks, only for Emma to sigh and remind her that she has already tried on that exact dress 20 times. Emma asks if she is truly that excited to meet Nox, to which the fiancé responds with an enthusiastic nod. Emma clarifies that she's asking because this is their very first meeting since Nox officially became her fiancé. The fiancé pouts, complaining that Emma is giving half-hearted answers because she is tired of the dress rehearsal. Back in Nox's private study, the strong scent of potion crafting fills the quiet room. Nox looks around, spotting Alina as she carefully finishes working at the wooden table. She hands over the completed potion, but immediately expresses deep concern because Nox looks completely pale and exhausted. Ignoring his failing health, Nox commands her to show him the newly brewed elixir immediately. Alina holds her breath as the system window confirms the successful crafting of the advanced grade elixir of wind. "Tell!" Nox smiles, staring at the glowing blue liquid that he has finally obtained. He praises Elena for her incredible work, knowing his plans would have completely collapsed without her genius. Without hesitating, Nox downs the entire glowing blue elixir in 3 large gulps. Feeling the wind mana rushing through his veins, Nox declares that all their preparations are finally complete. He asks his companions if they are ready to head to Eldine Academy, even as the system warns him that his remaining lifespan has dropped to 150 days. The system window flashes with a major alert, confirming that the mana sensitivity genius trait has been activated now that his mana has reached 10. Stepping off his carriage at the academy entrance, Nox's signature silver hair and purple eyes instantly draw the attention of the whispering crowd. The students exchange panicked warnings, reminding each other that speaking ill of the Reinhofer troublemaker could easily get them killed. Overhearing the whispers, Nox smugly asks why the entrance is so noisy, mockingly wondering if there is a stray dog barking somewhere. His cold remark immediately shuts down the gossiping crowd, cementing his fearsome reputation. A familiar voice calls out his name, causing him to turn around in the crowded courtyard. Seeing his companions have arrived early, Nox tries to keep his cool, but the system alerts him that his acting genius skill is temporarily shaken. As Emma tells her mistress to step down and greet her fiancé properly, the clumsy noblewoman slips, tumbling down the carriage stairs with a loud crash. Stunned, Nox watches the chaotic scene unfold, completely unprepared for his fiancé's clumsy entrance. The loud commotion instantly draws the attention of everyone nearby, making their highly anticipated reunion a chaotic spectacle. Eleanor de Rivellin stares up at Nox, demanding to know why he saved her life during the entrance exam. Nox curses internally as his acting genius trait begins to slip, forcing him to quickly lie that he was simply targeting a monster and she just happened to be in the way. Eleanor is not buying this weak excuse for a second as she watches Nox walk away into the snowy landscape. True to her reputation as the cold and calculating fox of wealth, Eleanor believes that absolutely anything in this world can be bought for the right price. She reflects on how Nox even rejected the official rewards for his heroic deed, making his cold excuse feel like a massive lie. While her associates dismiss Nox as a simple good-for-nothing who got lucky, Eleanor remains completely unconvinced. Convinced that Nox is hiding a far deeper motive, Eleanor decides she needs to investigate him further. She insists on personally handling the investigation, knowing that poking around the powerful Reinhofer family could bring ruin to her own people if they are caught. Back at the academy, the daily grind of training and imperial history classes begins as carriages roll through the massive courtyard. Deep inside his private study, Nox prepares himself to navigate a world that was once considered a peaceful place of wonder. When his loyal maid Leah asks if he is doing all right, Nox reassures her that his chronic cold hands and feet have already been cured. Knowing he must eliminate any unexpected variables to recover his memories, Nox realizes he has to step up and play the role of the absent protagonist, even though the body he possessed is destined to be a villain. A sudden realization hits him that there is a brilliant loophole to bypass this structural limitation. It is the ultimate method to play the part of both the villain and the protagonist at the exact same time. Meanwhile, a brutal clash erupts in the distance as defenseless victims are cut down in a violent ambush. A dying fighter warns Luna that the demonic humans have finally made their move, setting the stage for a terrible awakening. They warn that a devastating storm of blood is about to sweep across the continent once more. Standing over the bloody aftermath, a determined figure declares that all this sacrifice is necessary to bring about the complete destruction of the Archive Empire. Sitting at his desk, Nox contemplates a universal truth that all veteran gamers eventually realize. He notes that only a razor-thin line separates the heroic protagonist from the ultimate villain. Both roles share incredibly similar paths, with modern villains often driven by tragic trauma and disadvantaged lives rather than pure, absolute evil. Because these villains possess deep, complex motivations, players have always been completely captivated by them. Naturally, this doesn't make heroes and villains identical, but it blurs the moral line significantly. While a game villain normally can never cross over to become the protagonist, Nox knows those rigid rules don't apply to his current reality. Slipping away into the dark corridors of the city, Nox begins his dangerous descent to find the underworld. Although he hates risking his life, he must seek out the Empire's most notorious rebel group, Lunatic, where those who plot to overthrow the Imperial family assemble. Steeling his resolve, Nox unleashes a spark of magic and prepares to enter the den of thieves. Meanwhile, back at the Academy's Grand Assembly, the staff gathers around a massive conference table in deep concern. The nervous instructors whisper among themselves, wondering if another dangerous mistake has been made. A stern voice snaps them back to attention, forcing the embarrassed instructors to quickly laugh off their gossiping. The dean reprimands the distracted staff before steering the conversation back to the hostile forces that breached the academy's recent entrance exam. The administration confirms that the enemy's ultimate objective is to bring down both Eldine Academy and the entire empire. They realize that the enemy intentionally targeted Eleanor because of her family's massive influence over the empire's financial networks. The staff stands and salutes, ready to implement strict security measures to protect their high-value targets. But the dean stops them, revealing that there is one more highly dangerous individual they must keep an eye on. She confirms the threat, recalling how a mysterious student effortlessly dominated the battlefield during the chaos of the test. When asked who this incredible prodigy is, the instructors are shocked to hear that the legendary Noah von Trinity has personally acknowledged him. The room erupts in disbelief when a dean names Nox von Reinhafter, whom they all previously despised as a lazy, lustful disappointment. Unbeknownst to them, the very boy they are gossiping about is currently tracing his fingers along a dusty wall in the lower slums. Meanwhile, other nobles scoff at the news, completely unable to accept that a known failure could possess such terrifying latent power. Nox steps into a dimly lit tavern, where a rugged man immediately confronts him and asks if he has lost his way. Recognizing the man as Chiron, the secret gatekeeper of the rebellion, Nox calmly recites the password. "Moonlight on Talon Feather! Cheers for the Empire!" The stunned Chiron steps aside and allows him entry, completely baffled as to how a young noble obtained their highly classified code. Before heading in, Nox asks for a name, and the man simply introduces himself as Chiron. Standing before a shelf of ancient bottles, Nox recalls the activation sequence needed to unlock the hidden portal. He carefully turns the heavy clay vases, dialing in the precise numbers to trigger the mechanism. A blinding magical light erupts as a system alert warns Nox that the high-level teleportation spell is forcing his mana to flow in reverse. His internal energy destabilizes violently as the spatial magic takes hold and warps his body to the hidden coordinates. Cursing his weak physical stats, Nox fights off a wave of severe dizziness as he materializes in a grand, ruined temple. High above him, a powerful figure descends from the rafters and demands to know who has dared to breach their inner sanctum. Staring directly at the legendary rebel leader, Nox calmly calls out her name, Luna, and states that he came specifically to find her. Luna demands to know his identity, and Nox proudly introduces himself as Nox von Reinhafter, declaring his desire to join her rebellion. Later that night, Luna sits by the window, repeating the young noble's name as she ponders his bizarre entrance. She realizes Nox already knew her mentor Celsus was dead, proving the Reinhafer family's claims of him being a worthless failure were a massive lie. She recalls how Nox briefly outmaneuvered her in a flash of raw speed, matching the fluid movement of her late master. She looks out into the starry night sky, completely unable to comprehend the boy's true motives. Brushing her doubts aside, Luna resolves that she will simply crush anyone who dares to get in the way of her grand plans. Under the cold starlight, she prepares herself for the incoming storm. Luna remembers her late master's warnings about the tyrannical Empress Esteban and her rival daughter Penelope, insisting that choosing a side is the only way to survive. He had commanded her to infiltrate Eldine Academy as her final assignment to decide which faction to support. Even after grueling sessions of pushing his physical limits, those final words echoed constantly in her mind. Meanwhile, back in his room, Nox tosses and turns as chaotic memories of brutal battles plague his sleep. Waking up in a cold sweat, he sighs in frustration, wishing the ghosts of the deceased would finally stop invading his dreams. Nox rubs his temples, irritated by the constant nocturnal visits of people long gone. Looking at the game data, Nox studies the terrifying profile of Kalen, the legendary S-rank Master Sword God. Known as one of the Three Sword Emperors, Kalen is a literal monster who reached the absolute peak of martial prowess at just 20 years old. To learn legendary styles without relying on his family, Nox must successfully prove his worth to Lunatic, leaving Luna to wonder why a noble heir would ever seek out a criminal syndicate. Despite the blood dripping down his chin, Nox looks Luna dead in the eye and declares his goal is to bring down the Archive Empire. He explains that destroying Eldine Academy is the crucial first step to crippling the Empire, offering to act as her personal spy within its walls. When Luna questions his competence, Nox confidently assures her that he is more than capable of handling the job. Smirking at his sheer audacity, Luna summons her loyal subordinate Duff to prepare for Nox's official trial, to check on our audiobook service for full audiobooks. Luna commands Duff to initiate the Lunar Trial, a lethal test designed to break even the strongest warriors. Duff hands Nox a dark robe and instructs him to wear it and follow him deep into the temple ruins. Stepping into the courtyard, Nox grins beneath his hood, pleased that his calculated infiltration plan is running perfectly. He recalls his extensive game knowledge, knowing that wearing the robe is normally the only way to avoid the devastating berserk status effect. The Crimson Moon drives people completely mad, granting them insane raw power in exchange for their sanity. To pass the trial, one must survive under the red moonlight while keeping their mind perfectly safe from the corruption of madness. While ordinary players were never given instructions on how to beat this level, Nox's extensive meta-knowledge makes him confident he can clear it. Luna warns him that there are only two outcomes to this trial. Either he passes to join her ranks, or he dies on the cold stone floor. Nox simply smiles, telling her that they will see about that as he steps forward. With a sharp ring, Nox draws his blade and watches a massive magical portal crack open the stone ground. An explosive shockwave ripples through the courtyard as hordes of vicious monsters crawl out of the abyss. Looking at the sheer quantity of beasts, Nox admits that their ridiculous numbers are far beyond what his current level should be able to handle. Luna gasps in absolute shock as Nox suddenly flings his protective robe away, exposing himself directly to the red moonlight. A system alert flashes as the crimson moonlight floods his body, initiating the berserk state and instantly boosting all his stats by 1.5 times. His physical parameters spike dramatically as the raw, untamed power of the negative status effect surges through his muscles. Crimson energy blasts outward as a final system warning threatens that his mind is about to be completely consumed. Nox spits a mouthful of blood as the psychological strain of the curse tries to tear his consciousness apart. His internal system screen flickers, confirming his stats are maxed out even as his terminal illness timer ticks down. Watching from the sidelines, Duff mutters in disbelief that Nox has thrown his life away, asking Luna if they should intervene. Luna coldly refuses, stating that Nox wouldn't listen to warnings anyway, and that his survival is entirely his own responsibility. Duff points out that if a high-ranking noble from the Reinhardt family dies under their watch, it could trigger a catastrophic war with his father Theo. Luna smiles confidently, promising Duff that she will personally ensure that such a disaster never comes to pass. She tells him to keep watching, confident that the daring young brat has a hidden strategy up his sleeve. Duff nods in agreement, stepping back as Nox grips his sword with a deadly focus. With a deafening roar, the first wave of gigantic, fanged beasts lunges straight at Nox's throat. Nox stands firm as a towering, blood-red dragon-like abomination dominates the battlefield. In a fraction of a second, Nox leaps into the air, his blade carving a dark, smoky arc through the creature's massive head. He lands gracefully amidst a fountain of black blood, his speed leaving a trail of absolute devastation behind him. Breathing heavily, Nox looks around at the blood-drenched field, pleased that his boosted stats are performing perfectly. He realizes his raw power has surged to a level that none of his academy peers could ever hope to match. Two more armored fiends close in, but with one clean swing, Nox shatters their heavy defense and severs their limbs. Though he is bruised and spitting blood, he laughs as the next wave of monsters rushes toward him. He ducks under a massive horn, slides between the beast's legs, and delivers a brutal vertical slash that splits its torso in half. The dust begins to settle as Nox stands tall over a mountain of slaughtered beasts, completely unbothered by the madness of the trial. Nox explains that while the berserk state is feared by all, he walked directly into its influence with the full intention of utilizing its power. A system alert confirms that his passive traits of swordsmanship, combat, and mana sensitivity have completely neutralized the mental strain of the curse, keeping his mind perfectly intact. With a smug grin, Nox realizes that having 3 legendary genius traits is utterly unfair, and he is going to milk that advantage for all it is worth. Channeling his remaining mana, Nox unleashes his ultimate technique, Black Execution, against the final wave. The battlefield explodes in a burst of dark energy, and a system window alerts him that his black flame ring has extended his life by over 2 days. Nox chuckles at the life extension, mockingly inviting his enemies to try being terminally ill if they have a problem with his performance. As the remaining beasts squeal in agony, Nox sighs and complains about how noisy they are. He leans heavily on his sword, exhaling a long breath as the last of the crimson aura dissipates from his skin. Walking up through the wreckage, Duff quietly asks if the trial is finally over. Looking at the absolute slaughter, Duff admits that they have no choice but to officially accept Nox into their ranks. He notes that there are only a handful of warriors on the entire continent who possess this level of raw talent. Duff hesitates for a moment, wondering if they should put Nox down right now just in case the madness eventually consumes his mind. But Nox merely wipes the blood from his face, looking up at the crimson sky with completely clear, focused eyes. He drops to one knee to let his exhausted body recover from the massive physical toll of the battle. Luna steps out of the shadows, walking through the smoldering ruins of the temple to greet her newest recruit. She declares the trial officially over, muttering to herself that Theo has truly raised an absolute monster. Nox looks up and weakly smiles, proudly confirming that he succeeded in his mission. Amused by his sheer grit, Luna hands him a dark cloak, explaining that it is a prestigious robe reserved exclusively for the noble members of her organization. Nox accepts the garment, a grin spreading across his face as his system confirms the rare gear acquisition. Along with the robe, a new notification reveals he has unlocked the passive skill Shadow Step, allowing him to warp through physical obstacles. Dark, ethereal shadows wrap around Nox's body as the legendary equipment bonds with his soul. Looking at his newly acquired strength, Nox knows his conquest of the underworld is officially underway. Though the skill's damage multiplier only activates during the night, he knows a 1.2 times attack boost is an incredibly lethal advantage. His system screen updates, showing a solid increase in his willpower stat as an added reward for clearing the trial. Wiping the blood from his cheek, Nox mutters that he has walked away with the absolute best possible outcome. Nox points out to Luna that no recruit in their history has ever cleared the lunar trial with such a flawless, dominant performance. When Nox demands to be treated according to his legendary results, Luna chuckles, warning the bold newcomer that she hopes he can back up his arrogant attitude. She reaches into her coat and presents him with a pristine, glowing white mask that her group recently acquired. She introduces the artifact as the Moon Shadow, explaining that it has the mystical ability to create a perfect physical clone of the user. Luna notes that this duplicate will be crucial for his espionage work at the Academy, asking if this legendary reward is enough to satisfy him. Nox eagerly accepts the mask, utterly thrilled that he has finally secured the exact legendary artifact he targeted from the start. A system prompt flashes, asking him to input the name, traits, and details of the duplicate he wishes to manifest. Nox reveals that obtaining the Moon Shadow was the sole reason he rushed to find Lunatic, as it allows him to physically play the roles of both the savior and the villain at the same time. After thanking Luna, she commands him to listen closely as she explains the strict 5-tier ranking system that governs their members. Nox nods in understanding as Luna orders him to remain on standby until she sends him his very first official assignment. With a final sharp look, Luna warns Nox that she expects him to live up to his legendary name. Once Nox leaves, Luna remarks on how interesting the boy is, while the shaken Duff admits he is terrified by how a mere human survived the Crimson Madness. Luna explains that fighting under the moon without the protective robe proves that Nox has the insane grit required to gamble his very life for power. Agreeing with her assessment, Duff suggests they keep a close eye on the young noble's progress from afar. Luna agrees, eager to see if Nox will keep them entertained and ultimately serve as an asset to their grand rebellion. Meanwhile, back in his thoughts, Nox laughs off the idea that he truly gambled his life away at the temple altar. He reveals that he was never in any danger because he possessed the ultimate method to perfectly resist the berserk status effect. By combining his passive skills of swordsmanship and combat genius, he was able to completely nullify the madness while keeping the massive stat buffs. Back at the tavern, Chiron comments that it looks like the young master managed to get exactly what he wanted from the trial. When Chiron complains that it feels unfair that they haven't formally introduced themselves, Nox is caught slightly off guard. Nox formally introduces himself as Nox von Reinhofer, and Chiron bids him a casual farewell. Chiron warns him to keep his head down and try not to stand out too much as he slips back into the Grand Academy grounds. But as Nox slips into his dorm room, his furious mate Leah catches him red-handed, demanding to know why he sneaked out on his very first day. Nox panics internally, completely baffled as to how she woke up when he specifically made sure she was fast asleep before he left. Leah lectures him relentlessly, pleading with him to stop doing dangerous things because she believes he can still be rehabilitated. When Nox tries to casually deflect and ask about her day, she immediately calls him out on his transparent distraction. She admits that the training classes for academy maids are incredibly stressful because they are mostly run by arrogant, low-ranking nobles. Hearing her struggle, Nox reaches into his pocket and hands her a small, heavy leather pouch. He tells the confused maid to only open it when she is in deep trouble, promising that it contains an item that will resolve any conflict very reasonably. Though she begs to open it now, Nox firmly tells her no, forcing her to reluctantly agree to keep it tucked away for a true emergency. After commanding her not to hesitate in using his gift, a system prompt flashes, confirming he has officially settled into Eldine Academy. Nox collapses onto his bed with a massive sigh of relief as his system alerts him that the entire first chapter of the main story has been cleared. But before he can even sleep, His system inbox chimes with a brand new, mysterious piece of mail. He opens the letter, watching the interface shift into a brilliant golden display. An elegant, dark feather drifts down across his screen as the mysterious sender's text begins to load. The sender congratulates him on his academy admission in a highly personal tone, convincing Nox that this anonymous individual knows his true identity. The letter warns him that his real trials are only just beginning, and that the incoming hardships will be far more painful than anything he has faced so far. Yet, the sender encourages him to push forward, declaring that Nox is the only one who can bring this entire story to its true ending. Apologizing for the cryptic warning, the writer promises to help as much as possible, offering a valuable gift attached to the message. Disappointed that the attached items aren't immediately useful, Nox sits back to organize his thoughts. He deduces that the sender must be a game master of inner lunatic, considering their bizarre ability to freely interfere with the system code. Shaking his head, Nox decides to stop worrying about unanswerable questions and put his entire focus into clearing the main storyline to beat the game. He opens the attached gift, only to let out a gasp of surprise as a brand new View Character System menu materializes before him. Reading the list of legendary names including Theo, Alan, and Hearts, Nox's eyes widen as he realizes the massive family secrets that are finally within his grasp. Staring at the glowing family screen, Nox prepares himself to rewrite the destiny of the entire Reinhardt lineage. Nox reflects on the history of this world, which was once a place of peace before everything changed. He marvels at his incredible insight ability, noting that in the game he would normally need to see his targets in person to examine them. Now, he can check the status of any character he has met at any time, a cheat-like gift that feels like it was sent directly by a game master. Nox looks at the rising stats of his rival Theo and realizes just how quickly his stamina is increasing. Studying the numbers makes Nox realize a crucial truth about the world around him. He accepts that while this reality looks exactly like the game, it is far more dangerous, forcing him to face a literal hell-level difficulty. Fortunately, his class selection went smoothly, securing him vital combat and magic techniques along with imperial history and writing skills. Over at Eldine Academy, a crowd gathers in the narrow brick alleyways as gossip begins to brew. Whispers spread like wildfire as students spot a familiar face in the crowd. They point and mock Jitri, calling her a shameless former noble who fell to commoner status and crawled her way into the academy beside her young master. The gossiping students sneer that Jitri has a pretty face she likely uses to bewitch her notoriously lustful and good-for-nothing master. They laugh and joke that her family is completely insignificant, so they have absolutely nothing to worry about. Though Jitri has endured countless insults as a fallen noble, she refuses to let these malicious rumors bring shame to Nox. Determined to protect her master's reputation, she steps forward to confront the bullies. Jitri politely asks the ringleader for a moment of her time. The bully, Giselle of the Flores family, haughtily replies that as a count's daughter she has no time to waste talking to a mere commoner. When Jitri demands an apology for the unfounded rumors, Giselle sneers and refuses, stating that the high society reputation of Jitri's master is already garbage. Giselle rejects the request outright, reminding Jitri that social status is everything in this brutal academy. Realizing that words are useless against these snobs, Jitri prepares to take direct action just as her master taught her. Suddenly, a massive burst of magical energy shatters the air as a powerful figure descends upon the courtyard. Standing in the center of the brilliant blue light, Nox introduces himself to the shocked crowd. He glares at the arrogant nobles, letting the sheer weight of the legendary Reinhardt name sink in. With a terrifyingly calm smile, Nox declares that they are all dead meat as he unleashes a spectacular explosion of magic. As the smoke clears, Jitri watches in awe, wondering if this brutal display was indeed her master's idea of resolving things reasonably. One of the stunned onlookers sheepishly asks for her name, completely overwhelmed by the explosive entrance. Giselle begins to panic, realizing that the formidable Reinhardt family could easily erase her entire house from existence in the blink of an eye. Jitri lets out a soft sigh, amazed that the terrifying situation was resolved exactly as her master predicted. She can only wonder what kind of deep, strategic thoughts are running through her master's mind as they walk away. Back at the academy dorms, Jitri catches up with Nox and asks if he is all right, noting the heavy dark circles under his eyes. Nox assures her that he is fine now, that his class selection is successfully completed. Suddenly, a shady-looking boy interrupts their walk to cheerfully greet the youngest son of the Reinhardt family. Nox demands to know who he is, prompting the boy to confidently introduce himself. Nox instantly recognizes him as Rick, and his mind races as a dangerous shockwave of adrenaline hits his system. His system confirms that a highly dangerous character from the early story arc has approached him, Nox recalls that this seemingly friendly boy is Rick the Deceitful, a literal demon worshipper who is destined to betray the rival and merchant family. This means Rick is the ultimate traitor who will eventually stab Eleanor in the back. Knowing that making friends with your enemy's enemy is a fatal mistake in this hellish game, Nox prepares to reject him. Nox coldly tells the traitor to get lost, leaving Rick completely stunned. He demands to know if Rick needs him to repeat himself, his piercing glare making the demon worshipper break a sweat. With a swift and decisive turn, Nox walks away, leaving a bewildered Rick standing in the courtyard. G-Tree quickly runs to keep up with her master's sudden departure. "Oh!" She gently teases him about his incredibly weak, fragile body, prompting a heavy sigh of annoyance from Nox. G-Tree points out that he recently suffered from the chills, the flu, and freezing extremities all at once, though Nox insists he is perfectly fine now. Nox confidently declares that he will not die anytime soon, though G-Tree admits she still feels highly uneasy with him always being at the center of trouble. Nox jokes about his sudden popularity before shifting his focus back to their primary objectives. He knows that G-Tree's intense, single-minded trait makes her incredibly anxious whenever they are apart. Curious about his behavior, G-Tree asks why he was so incredibly hostile to Rick just moments ago. Nox strictly warns her that no matter what happens, having Rick around them will never bring anything good. G-Tree wonders if this has to do with Eleanor, but she quickly trusts her master's judgment and promises to be extremely careful. Nox nods in approval, knowing that they must navigate the academy with absolute caution from this point forward. As they step into the grand lecture hall, a massive commotion echoes through the crowded room. Nox looks down at the chaotic gathering, preparing himself for the next inevitable hurdle. He sits down and mentally prepares for the challenge, knowing that his infamously terrible reputation will make the upcoming assignment nearly impossible. Up at the podium, the stern instructor announces that the cadets must quickly organize themselves into groups of 4. The other students snicker, whispering that a public outcast like Nox will never find 3 other people willing to team up with him. Nox asks what happens if a cadet fails to form a team, and the instructor bluntly replies that they will receive an immediate F grade because solo work is strictly forbidden. His system confirms that receiving even a single F at Eldine results in immediate expulsion, prompting Nox to think fast. Chaos erupts in the classroom as desperate students rush to brown-nose the popular cadets and royal princesses for a spot on their teams. While the nobles bicker and offer lavish meals to secure alliances, Nox focuses his mind to find a viable solution. The loud negotiations of the wealthy students echo across the room, leaving Nox completely isolated. Suddenly, a confident voice cuts through the noise as Eleanor approaches Nox and asks if he disliked her previous gift. She asks for a chance to repay her debt, offering to join his team despite his cold and arrogant reputation. Eleanor reiterates her offer, and Nox instantly realizes that teaming up with her is a crucial piece of the puzzle. Before he can answer, a hyperactive Talia runs over and loudly begs Nox to team up with her as well. Nox looks at his 2 unexpected new female teammates, realizing his plan is coming together perfectly. Eleanor sighs and says she understands, seeing through Talia's overly kind nature. Nox internally notes that Talia's natural kindness makes her want to rescue someone she perceives as lonely, even if her energetic behavior drives him slightly crazy. Eleanor mutters that this development is highly unexpected, leaving Talia slightly confused. She admits she is fascinated that an outcast like Nox actually has a friend, which silently irritates him. Talia happily points out that they only need 1 more member to complete their roster, rendering Nox's opinion completely irrelevant. Knowing his teammates' sharp intuition is correct, Nox turns his thoughts toward the brutal first episode of the main questline. He knows they must prepare for a devastating battle against a powerful archdemon that is fast approaching. Just then, a polite young cadet named Pell introduces himself to the trio. Nox pulls up Pell's status window and is stunned to find his skills are completely blank, save for a one-time use blessing. However, when Nox digs deeper, he discovers Pell has mastered the legendary Divine Blade, passive skill. While it's a shame that the incredible power can't be used directly by the protagonist, Nox finds it highly suspicious that an ordinary cadet has a rare skill usually reserved for high-ranking saints. He quickly hides his surprise and welcomes Pell to the team, who eagerly looks forward to working with everyone. With their 4-man roster complete, Eleanor, Talia, and Nox officially introduce themselves to their new teammate. The instructor looks over the room and confirms that all of the cadets have successfully formed their groups. Nox mutters a curse about the crazy old instructor, relieved to have barely survived the expulsion trap. As they prepare to leave, Talia nervously asks Nox what his lesson schedule looks like under the guise of casual curiosity. Knowing exactly what she is up to, Nox smugly asks if she expects him to hand over the easiest high-marking classes for free. Talia stammers in embarrassment as Nox walks away, completely shutting down her attempts to get a free ride. Later that evening, Nox explores the grand, sunset-lit campus of Eldine Academy. He looks over the outrageously expensive grimoires and textbooks, noting that commoners would find it nearly impossible to survive here without massive funding. He reminds himself that in this world, talent is completely useless unless you have the wealth to back it up. Suddenly, Jitri points out a loud commotion brewing in the distance. They walk over to the market square and find a furious shopkeeper spitting on the ground and screaming at a customer to get lost. Nobs immediately recognizes the customer as Leon von Marvis, the young patriarch of a rival dark family. Leon calmly states he is only trying to make a reasonable purchase, but the shopkeeper angrily accuses him of wasting time by repeatedly weighing the same cheap items. The shopkeeper tells him to stop talking nonsense and get lost, loudly complaining about the academy admitting a pathetic beggar. Leon stands frozen as the word beggar echoes through the crowd, his green eyes flashing with sudden, dangerous fury. He quietly mutters that he can never forgive anyone who insults his family, as dark, skeletal, magical energy begins to manifest around his hands. Nox watches in horror as the unstable boy prepares to unleash forbidden black magic right in the middle of a crowded civilian district. Realizing the sheer madness of using mana in public, Nox quickly moves to intervene. As the crowd panics and Jitri screams for her master, Nox charges straight toward the center of the dark magic. He knows that if he doesn't stop this crazy kid immediately, the entire district will be dragged into a massive catastrophe. The shopkeeper screams in terror as Leon's dark aura flares, threatening to tear the street apart. Suddenly, Nox lunges forward, grabbing Leon and forcefully commanding him to stand down and leave immediately. He glares at Leon, warning him that he will die if he continues to unleash this forbidden power. The arrogant shopkeeper continues to scream, demanding to know how these mere rascals dare to act so insolently in front of him. With a terrifying glare, Nox steps forward and asks if the loudmouthed merchant truly needs to be told who he is dealing with. Meanwhile, back at the Stillreiner Manor, Talia paces back and forth as she talks to her loyal maid, Emma. She desperately asks Emma if Nox is simply acting cold and shy because he is currently undergoing puberty. Emma sighs and replies that she has absolutely no idea what Nox is thinking, while Talia desperately tries to justify his cold behavior. She insists she is trying to be mature and not hold him back, though her nervous stammering tells a completely different story. Emma internally regrets speaking so highly of Nox to her young mistress in the past. Talia loudly asks why her fiancé is always so cold to her, repeating her theory about his sudden onset of puberty. As Emma listens, she realizes that Talia's romantic feelings for the cold young master are growing far deeper than anyone expected. Talia confidently declares that she is certain of his hidden affection, while Emma sweat drops at her mistress's wild delusions. Emma tries to gently suggest that Nox's cold behavior might actually reflect his true feelings, but Talia refuses to listen. Talia grabs Emma's hands and praises her for being an absolute genius when it comes to the art of dating. Emma awkwardly looks away, silently screaming the truth that she has never actually dated anyone in her entire life. Talia promises to constantly ask Emma for advice, leaving the poor maid sweating in absolute terror. Before she can confess her secret, a sudden knock on the door interrupts their conversation. Emma opens the door and introduces herself as the maid of the Stillreiner family. The visitor introduces herself as Eleanor, explaining that she is here to speak with Talia. Emma asks if she has a prior appointment, but Eleanor quickly cuts her off. Eleanor smiles sharply and states that she is here to discuss Nox. Talia's eyes widen at the mention of his name, eagerly welcoming her teammate inside. The two young noblewomen sit down, preparing to have a very serious discussion about their mutual classmate. Eleanor greets Talia with a polite smile, noting that this is their second meeting of the day. Back in District 4, Leon stares in absolute shock at the mysterious hooded boy standing before him. The arrogant shopkeeper gasps as he recognizes the legendary purple eyes of the Reinhofer family hidden beneath the dark cloak. Terrified of the dark family's wrath, the shopkeeper falls to his knees and desperately begs for forgiveness. Nox coldly tells the merchant to get lost, warning him that this is the absolute last time he will show him any mercy. The merchant quickly scrambles away in terror, leaving the two heirs alone on the dark street. Leon looks at his savior, still guarded as he demands to know why the Reinhofer heir is meddling in his business. Suddenly, Leon's dark mana flares up again as he prepares to summon a massive skeletal undead soldier. Leon demands to know if Nox truly wants to talk, his skeletal summon lunging forward with a terrifying roar. With lightning-fast speed, Nox sidesteps the dark magic and demands to know if Leon truly intends to speak through illegal black magic. Nox unsheathes his blade, his weapon glowing with a brilliant purple light that slices through the dark summoning. He shatters the skeletal hands into dust, the sheer pressure of his blade crushing Leon's mana to pieces. Nox warns Leon that casting such dangerous magic is essentially begging the Imperial family to throw him in prison. Leon stands shocked, slowly realizing that casting magic before reaching adulthood is indeed a severe crime. Realizing his foolishness, Leon lowers his head and mutters a quiet apology to his savior. Nox tells him that if he truly understands the danger, he should quickly buy what he needs and get out of the district. He tosses the heavy pouch of gold coins directly into Leon's hands to cover the purchase. Leon catches the pouch in absolute disbelief, asking why on earth a rival heir would help him so generously. Nox calmly replies that he certainly has his own hidden purposes for helping the fallen house of Marvis. May! Leon narrows his eyes, his dark skeletal summons quietly vanishing back into the shadows. He watches Nox closely, trying to gauge the true motives of the notorious young master. Nox turns his back, his cloak fluttering in the wind as he prepares to leave the alleyway. Leon calls out, stating that he can feel the unique, undead, controlling energy of the Marvis family resonating from Nox. He demands to know how on earth a Reinhafer managed to obtain the sacred power of his bloodline. He glares at Nox, demanding an explanation for the bizarre and impossible magical anomaly. Back at the Still Reiner estate, Talia asks Eleanor what she wishes to discuss so urgently. Eleanor is taken aback by Talia's incredibly elegant and calm demeanor, which is completely different from what she imagined. She wonders if Nox could actually hold genuine feelings for such a refined girl, before quickly brushing the ridiculous thought aside. Knowing a cold boy like Nox only views engagement as an annoying shackle, Eleanor decides to be completely straightforward. She warns Talia that Nox is an extremely dangerous person, especially since he is the heir to one of the most ruthless, dark families. Talia immediately cuts her off, firmly stating that she refuses to believe Nox is a bad person. Eleanor stares in disbelief, as Talia defends him with absolute, unshakable conviction. Eleanor demands to know why someone as honest and upright as Talia could possibly care for a notorious, good-for-nothing. Talia looks down at the table, her eyes filled with a deep and quiet intensity as she prepares to explain her trust. She firmly states that while Nox easily gets misunderstood because of his cold actions, that is only a tiny part of who he truly is. Talia insists that his distant behavior is merely a shield, and that there is a profound depth to his character. She reminds Eleanor that her trust in Nox has absolutely nothing to do with their political marriage talks. Eleanor argues that people do not change their fundamental nature so easily, remaining highly skeptical. Talia reminds Eleanor of the undeniable truth that Nox was the one who ultimately saved her life in her hour of need. She demands to know why Eleanor is still so determined to remain suspicious of him, despite his heroic actions. Eleanor looks away, admitting that she may have spoken out of turn in her relentless search for logical motives. She politely thanks Talia for her time and decides to bring their tense conversation to an immediate end. As Eleanor leaves the mansion, she walks out onto the quiet rooftop to clear her racing thoughts. Suddenly, Rick steps out of the shadows and asks if her conversation with Talia did not go well. Eleanor looks at the apprentice, her highly analytical mind instantly shifting back to her default state of skepticism. She reminds herself that constant doubt was the exact quality that allowed her to earn her legendary reputation in the financial world. She thinks back to the rumors of Nox's heroic deeds, wondering if a person can truly change overnight. Eleanor scoffingly dismisses the idea as completely ridiculous, refusing to let her guard down. She remains convinced that a person's core nature remains exactly the same, no matter how much time passes. Back in District 4, a powerful barrier of green energy flares up around Nox and Leon. Nox commands the onlookers to evacuate the area immediately before the magic causes further damage. Leon looks at the shimmering magic, recognizing that Nox has cast a highly advanced barrier spell. Nox explains that if Leon truly wanted to negotiate, he should have brought something far more valuable to the table. Leon scoffs, asking if a Reinhafer is truly in a position to demand proposals from him. He looks at Nox with narrow eyes, stating that the young master speaks as if he knows him on a deeply personal level. Nox replies that the Marvis family is historically one of the top 3 dark families, just like his own. Leon snaps that he hates when people use the past tense to describe his family's grand legacy. Nox reminds him of the brutal reality that his family has already fallen completely from grace. Leon grits his teeth as green magical energy swirls around his hands, his pride deeply wounded by the harsh truth. He asks if Nox is simply trying to exploit his desperate desire for family revenge. Nox shakes his head, calmly stating that revenge is not what he wants. Instead, Nox declares that his true goal is the complete revival and return of the Marvis family to the top of the continent. He asks if that isn't Leon's ultimate dream as well, leaving the young patriarch completely speechless. Leon quietens down and demands to know how Nox managed to obtain the unique magic of the Marvis family in the first place. Nox lies smoothly, claiming he obtained it completely by chance and only recently realized its historic connection to Leon's bloodline. Leon accepts the explanation, realizing Nox only intervened because of his vast knowledge of the political landscape. He thanks Nox for his crucial help, promising to repay the massive debt in the near future. Nox assures him that he expects no immediate repayment, his eyes fixed on the horizon as his grand plan falls into place. He looks out over the massive city, knowing that the inevitable split between the steel-driven West and the magic-steeped East has finally begun. A surging blast of magic ripples through the air as Nox activates the legendary power to strengthen the hour of the genius. Nox stands with ultimate confidence, flashing a cold smile as his newly awakened powers manifest around him. This devastating ability is widely recognized as the most broken skill available to any playable character. It operates as a hidden cheat code, designed to shatter the game's limits. The system interface flickers to life, warning him that this active skill can only be obtained by a character possessing multiple genius traits. Nox breaks out in a slight cold sweat as he recalls the sheer danger of unlocking this forbidden power. Dean. Noah suddenly approaches Nox, praising his incredible performance while he feigns innocence to avoid drawing suspicion. Noah notes that his sheer composure is the only reason they were able to survive a brutal encounter against a towering ice troll. She questions if the patriarch, Theo, simply lacked the vision to recognize his own son's hidden strength. Noah confidently declares that there is absolutely no way the legendary Sword Emperor has bad judgment. Nox realizes that Dean is incredibly suspicious of him because the original owner of this body was a useless failure. The system suddenly activates his acting genius trait, stabilizing his heart rate and wiping away any trace of panic. Nox calmly retorts that his past failures should not concern the Academy. His bold words only excite Noah further, prompting her to confess that his fascinating talent makes her want to steal him away. Nox brushes her off politely, stating that such inappropriate comments are better left ignored. As the dust settles over the ruined battlefield, Nox keeps his guard up. Noah smiles knowingly, challenging him to see how much longer he can keep his secrets hidden from her eyes. Nox maintains his cold exterior, realizing he has finally cornered her into handing over the item he needs. Noah presents him with a legendary scroll designed to greatly increase the efficiency of a specific active skill. Nox admits that even he has never heard of such a highly coveted precious artifact. With a sudden burst of momentum, Nox channels his mana to activate the upgrade sequence. A sudden shockwave ripples through his body on the stone staircase as the scroll begins to react. The system displays the information for the Supreme Grade consumable, confirming a massive physical boost to any chosen technique. When prompted by the flashing blue system interface, Nox immediately confirms the consumption of the scroll. The artifact shatters into a blinding aura of particles as Nox designates his primary genius skill as the target. The upgrade succeeds instantly, evolving his core ability into the newly enhanced Hour of the Genius Plus. A massive shockwave of golden energy erupts from his body, doubling his total combat output. The interface updates to show that the duration of his ultimate cheat skill has been extended to 10 minutes. Nox is thrilled, knowing this specific ability is normally impossible to strengthen due to its naturally overpowered nature. Noah asks if he achieved his goal, and dismisses him with a silent wave of her hand. Nox plays off the massive surge of energy as a complete fluke, hoping to avoid drawing any more attention to himself. Nox offers a formal thank you before departing, intending to keep a low profile within the Academy. Noah watches his retreating figure, whispering that the young heir is a highly dangerous prodigy she must watch carefully. She smiles in dark anticipation, eager to see the absolute monster he will eventually become. A final shockwave of raw magic shakes the room as Noah revels in the thrill of discovering such a dangerous talent. The scene changes to the towering spires of the Imperial Academy, where the freshman cadets assemble for their first magic lesson. The eccentric professor in charge is introduced as Ross von Celestia, a legendary theorist of Imperial magic. A glance at Ross's weak stat window reveals that, while his physical traits are abysmal, his academic knowledge is unmatched. Nox observes the professor, noting that several arrogant noble cadets are already looking down on the frail scholar. Ras steps to the center of the lecture hall, announcing a practical exam to test their elemental alignments. He immediately singles out Nox, demanding to know the specific elemental attribute he wields. Nox confidently states his attribute is darkness, explaining that it is a destructive element that refuses to mix with others. This chaotic element is famous for its raw, uncontrollable power, leaving only a handful of families capable of using it. When Ross asks which element serves as the direct counter to darkness, Nox instantly answers that it is divinity. Ras presses him further, asking which side would emerge victorious in a direct clash of elements. Nox answers that divinity would prevail, prompting the professor to ask how he would handle fighting a divine wielder. Nox ruthlessly declares that he would simply slaughter them before they ever realized his presence to eliminate any future problems. A heavy, terrifying silence falls over the lecture hall as the students shudder at Nox's cold survival logic. The scene changes to a side story, where a mysterious figure undergoes a grueling and agonizing transformation. The narrator explains that the ancient era of the gods has passed, leaving behind dangerous remnants of dark magic. The candidate screams in agony as dark marks spread across his body, pushing his physical vessel past its limits. He grasps a glowing vial of dark essence, desperately trying to survive the intense strain. He stands up, panting heavily as he prepares to shed his humanity to become a true demon. A massive, terrifying demonic entity commands Hausstulz to cast aside his mortal weaknesses in exchange for absolute power. Hausstulz kneels before the towering shadow, swearing to do everything in his power to revive the demon lord. A dark crimson light flares wildly as the demonic pact is sealed. Full audiobooks are available on our platform. Back at the academy classroom, a student adjusts his uniform as the magic lesson resumes. Ras accepts his answer with a nod, admitting that pulling out potential threats by their roots is indeed the most logical path. Nox activates his acting genius trait once more to maintain his cool, unbothered facade. Ras smiles to himself, understanding why the dean is so fascinated by this ruthless freshman cadet. The professor suddenly barks an order to his assistant to prepare a dangerous, live demon adequacy test. Ras smirks, fully intending to bring Nox's haughty, confident attitude down a level. The assistant nervously rolls in a reinforced cage as the surrounding students mutter in panic. Inside the heavy iron cage is an imp, a low-ranked demonic beast that snarls viciously at the terrified cadets. The class erupts in protests, claiming that testing freshmen with a live demon on day one is completely insane. Ras silences their screams, reminding them that as elites of the academy, they must get used to the terrifying reality of demons. He commands each cadet to project their raw mana directly into the cage to force the demonic beast into submission. Nox stares calmly at the locked cage, completely unbothered by the sudden threat. The system begins a strict 15-minute countdown as the high-stakes exam officially starts. Ras watches closely, convinced that even a prestigious Reinhofer heir will struggle against a live demonic entity. Suddenly, a massive wave of oppressive magical pressure floods the entire room, warping the air itself. The other cadets gasp and stagger backward as their vision blurs under the crushing gravity of the mana. Nox remains perfectly upright, casually asking the professor to swap his imp out because it is already broken. The demon inside his cage is shown whimpering in absolute terror, completely dominated by Nox's passive mana. Ras erupts in wild, ecstatic laughter, completely blown away by Nox's miraculous talent. He points dramatically at Nox, offering to make him his top disciple and guarantee him the best student title. Nox instantly recognizes the offer as a classic trap that would turn him into an academic workhorse. While the rest of the class looks on in pure envy, Nox delivers a cold and immediate refusal. He states that being a top student is just a polite term for becoming the professor's personal slave. Ras stands completely frozen in shock, unable to comprehend that a mere freshman has just rejected his highly coveted offer. The lecture hall erupts into loud whispers as the cadets gossip about Nox's suicidal boldness. The surrounding students can only watch in awe as Nox remains the only cadet standing completely tall and unbothered. The story jumps back a few hours, showing Ras arguing with his academic peers about Nox's highly rumored genius. Ras remains incredibly skeptical of the rumors, despite the dean herself warning him to watch the boy closely. He resolved to test Nox with his own eyes, believing no student could truly live up to such massive hype. Back in the present, Ras stammers in absolute panic as Nox begins to walk away from him. The surrounding cadets continue to mutter in shock, unable to believe someone would throw away such a massive academic opportunity. The class president groans, frustrated that another massive troublemaker is ruining the class order. An elite student steps forward, loudly questioning why the professor is favoring Nox when there are more outstanding cadets. Nox immediately labels this rival a smart asshole who only knows how to butter up the faculty. Ras attempts to calm the room, admitting that his sudden decision might seem unfair without context. He declares that he will prove exactly why Nox is the only logical choice to become his apprentice. The professor begins explaining the complex mechanics of how Nox effortlessly controlled the demon's mana flow. Back at his desk, Nox groans, realizing that Ras's obsession with him is only going to get worse. Knox reflects on his rare talent, knowing that his passive mana sensitivity makes his actions look like a legendary miracle. Back in the lecture hall, Ross concludes his lecture, claiming Knox is the only student worthy of his teachings. Knox interrupts him once again, suggesting that there are far better candidates in the room. Ras gasps in absolute shock as Knox packs his things and completely ignores his desperate cries. The student council members watch him leave, noting that Knox is completely different from his pathetic rumors. A blonde-haired rival cadet smirks, suddenly finding himself highly interested in the mysterious Reinhofer heir. A heavy, ominous cloud hangs over the classroom as the students contemplate Knox's terrifying display. Knox walks down the hallway, sighing in relief after finally escaping the clingy professor. He laments the sheer lack of normal people in this academy, hoping he can finally live in peace. Back in the dorms later that night, Knox's classmate asks him if something terrible happened at the school. Knox shudderingly recalls Ras cornering him in the canteen, whispering for him to accept the apprenticeship. Even when Knox hid in the restroom stalls, the crazy professor was there, peering over the door with the same request. The relentless stalking has left Knox completely drained and thoroughly annoyed. Knox screams at Ross to stop, but the eccentric scholar only laughs, loving how rough Knox is with his words. His classmate is deeply confused, pointing out that Ross is widely respected as a kind and legendary scholar. Knox explains that the professor is severely crippled by hidden negative traits, including trauma and paranoia. The scene changes to a dark memory, where a violent and bloody clash of steel echoes inside a grand castle hall. A shadowy warrior unleashes a ferocious, blood-spattering slash of dark energy that shreds the guards in seconds. The commander screams for reinforcements to stop the intruder, but the attacker mockingly calls their efforts pathetic. The dust settles to reveal Garen stepping calmly over the broken bodies of his family's elite guards. Wiping a splatter of blood from his cheek, Garen asks why a father would treat his eldest son like a common thief. The surviving guards are paralyzed with fear, unable to move a single muscle under Garen's suffocating aura. Patriarch! Theo steps forward, demanding to know why Garen has dared to set foot inside the family estate again. Theo coldly tells him that his time is running out, and he must immediately leave the house. Garen laughs, surrounded by dark shadows as he raises his sword against his own father. He reveals his true purpose is simple, demanding to know where Theo has hidden the Patriarch's legendary heirloom. Theo narrows his eyes as Garen demands the exact location of the legendary sword. Stormbringer! Garen slams his sword down, unleashing a violent storm of purple lightning that shatters the stone floor. The dark lightning tears through the pillars as Garen demands the relic of the first Patriarch, Jean von Reinhofer. Theo is absolutely furious that Garen would dare speak the founder's name, telling his son he understands nothing of value. Garen steps closer, mockingly asking why Theo let his previous wife die if he cares so much about family honor. A loyal butler gasps in terror, warning Garen that his mother's name is strictly forbidden in front of the Patriarch. Garen sneers, declaring that his only mother is Priscilla and that Knox's mother was nothing but a shameful mistake. Theo's eyes flare with cold, murderous intent as he delivers a final command to get out before he executes his own son. Garen sheathes his weapon and retreats, warning his father that he will deeply regret this choice very soon. Theo stands alone in the ruined hall, his hands trembling slightly as he maintains his icy composure. The head butler approaches, deeply worried that Garen's open alliance with demons will bring absolute ruin to their house. He urges the Patriarch to officially select a new successor to stabilize the family line. The butler happily reports that Knox has taken first place in the Eldine admission exams, catching the attention of the sages. He reminds Theo that Dean Noah herself has personally acknowledged Knox's incredible talent. Theo stares at the report, realizing that Knox might actually have the potential to claim the heir's seat. Theo remembers Knox's combat prowess and decides to monitor his growth closely. The Patriarch smiles grimly, visualizing Knox sitting upon the throne of the Reinhofer family. Back at the academy the next day, Ras begs Knox once again to become his apprentice. Knox flatly refuses again, telling the professor that fame is a useless luxury for a terminally ill noble. Later, Knox's classmate notes that Ross's desperate behavior is completely out of character for him. Knox decides to confront Ras directly to show him his physical flaws so the professor will finally give up. Sitting across from Ross, Knox demands to know the real reason why a genius theorist is so obsessed with a sickly cadet. Ras goes silent for a moment, before quietly asking Knox if he has some time to listen to a story. Knox smiles thinly, replying that, as a terminally ill, good-for-nothing, he has nothing but time. Ras chuckles, admitting that Knox has seen right through his eccentric academic facade. He reveals that he needs Knox's talent to fulfill his lifelong wish and prevent others from dying helpless. Ras looks down, softly stating that he wants to prevent anyone else from dying like his son did. He recounts his past, explaining how he struggled through the academy with zero physical talent while facing constant contempt. He managed to become a professor through sheer theoretical research, but the academic elite still looked down on him. Even when he married, his achievements and theses were constantly published under other scholars' names. His only comfort was his son, who successfully graduated from Eldin Academy with dreams of raising their family's name. His son promised to work tirelessly so that people would finally speak highly of his father. His son proudly joined the Emperor's frontline vanguard, eager to win glory on the battlefield. However, because his son lacked practical defensive talent, he was easily struck down by a stray, low-mana arrow. Ross explains that his obsession with magic theory is entirely to protect the weak from suffering the same tragic fate. Nox listens quietly, knowing that in this brutal world, hundreds of families share the exact same tragedy. Yet, staring at Raz's lonely back, Nox feels a rare wave of genuine sympathy for the broken professor. Nox looks at him, stating that he is even more certain now that he must reject the offer. He explains that there is another student out there who will listen to Ross's story with the serious devotion he deserves. Nox bids the professor farewell, leaving him to contemplate his words as he walks out of the room. Ras watches him go, realizing there is a striking resemblance between Nox and his late son. The scene changes to the quiet dormitories as night falls over the Grand Academy. Nox returns to his room, only to receive disastrous news from his maid, Jitri. She reveals that the eldest son Garen has returned and has already caused several deaths among the family's guard knights. Nox realizes the primary bringer of bad endings in this world has finally begun his deadly campaign. The looming threat of the ultimate villain sends a shiver down Nox's spine as he plans his next move. Nox asks Jitri if Garen attempted to cause any trouble when she visited the main estate recently. Meh! He knows that Garen deeply despises him and his mother, meaning anyone close to Nox is a target. Nox groans, wondering why his previous self had to make an enemy of literally everyone in the family. Jitri hesitates before revealing that Garen actually tried to recruit her as his personal servant. Nox is completely stunned, realizing his villainous brother is already trying to steal his closest allies. The narrative flashes back to the quiet corridors of the Reinhardt estate a few days ago. Garen had spotted Jitri walking through the halls, immediately sensing her extraordinary talent and potential. He cornered her, demanding she skip the formal pleasantries and listen to his demand. Garen told her he wanted her to become his exclusive maid, claiming only he could satisfy her hidden ambitions. Jitri bowed politely but delivered a cold, immediate refusal, stating she was already serving Master Nox. Garen sneered in disbelief, demanding to know how a mere good-for-nothing like Nox could earn her loyalty. Jitri looked him dead in the eye, proudly stating that serving Nox was her own personal choice as she walked away. Nox looks surprised as Jitri confidently stands her ground, explaining her choices. Jitri explains that she turned down the offer because she respects Nox and wants to stay by his side to see what he will do next. Garen cannot comprehend her loyalty and desperately tries to win her over by offering 3 times her current wages. Back at the manor, Jitri informs Nox about Garen's attempt to poach her, prompting Nox to ask how much money was offered. When Jitri reveals Garen offered to triple her salary, Nox calculates his budget and realizes he cannot afford to throw that much money around so early in the game. Unable to bear the thought of losing Jitri, Nox lets out a heavy sigh and promises to match Garen's offer by tripling her salary himself. Nox tells her to put the matter aside and focus on her work, but Jitri cannot help letting out a sudden giggle. Nox is left completely baffled, wondering if his extremely loyal maid just openly laughed at his grand financial gesture. Jitri reassures him that she has no intention of joining Garen because her current pay is already enough, leaving Nox to demand why she giggled. When Jitri claims she cannot tell him, Nox issues an official order, prompting her to excuse it as simply thinking of something funny. Nox chuckles at her terrible attempt at lying, ultimately letting it go since he is just glad she is staying. He swears to absolutely crush Garen for trying to steal his maid, though he admits he needs to focus on getting much stronger first. As a new student at Eldin Academy, Nox must face 5 mandatory classes designed to test every cadet's limits. The first 2 requirements are the theoretical history of the Archime Empire and the highly practical horsemanship course. Following these are the rigid knightly code and etiquette course, training students to act like proper nobility. While basic magic poses no threat, Nox faces his absolute worst nightmare in the final mandatory course. He is thrown directly into the grueling physical torture of stamina training. Forced to endure endless running and chin-ups, Nox's physical reserves quickly hit rock bottom. Gasping heavily for air on the ground, Nox is told by a classmate that his physical constitution is like a fragile mayfly. Nox defensively demands an explanation, only to be told that while his short-term bursts are lethal, his long-term endurance is utterly pathetic. This physical limitation acts like an insurmountable wall because of his hidden, cursed condition. His stamina is permanently locked at half capacity, meaning any reckless overexertion will physically shave precious time off his remaining lifespan. Nox watches in dread as a system window appears, coldly warning him that his lifespan is actively ticking away at an accelerated rate. He grumbles at how incredibly annoying his physical limitations are. Nearby, a suspicious student watches him, completely convinced that Nox is just pretending to be weak to maintain his reputation as a slacker. The student angrily vows to give Nox a severe beating if they ever cross paths in a duel. The academy's dark corridors remain quiet as the students wrap up their exhausting day. Meanwhile, in a dark alleyway, a mysterious figure in a brown cap mutters about the youngest son of the Reinharnated family. The figure wonders what exactly Nox is planning to do to him. Moving through the dark streets, Nox runs directly into this mysterious individual, who acts surprised to encounter the famous noble. Nox instantly recognizes him as Rick, whose real name is Schultz de Nefer. Rick is a notorious villain responsible for making some of the worst tragic endings in the game, on par with the first prince. Feeling a surge of tension, Nox acquires the high-level negotiation revision skill to help navigate this deadly encounter. Remembering that Rick will eventually betray his allies, Nox confronts him about a previous package and demands to know what business he has. Rick casually acts like his presence is nothing serious, claiming he was simply slightly puzzled by recent events. He smiles, calling their meeting in the graveyard a stroke of absolute fate. Nox scoffs, retorting that the head of the Rivalin family surely assigned him a far more sinister task than just taking a casual stroll. Nox resolves to uncover his hidden scheme as Rick coldly asserts that he despises people who talk too much. Rick promises to remember Nox's words before they part ways in the darkness. Sometime later, a student hand delivers requested research materials to Echidna, who expresses gratitude. Echidna mutters Nox's full name, completely lost in deep thought. Echidna stares out the window, deeply plagued by the baffling question of why Nox went out of his way to save her life when there was absolutely no reason to do so. Echidna points out that their respective families have no friendly ties, and if Nox wanted political gain, he would have accepted the professor's proposal. She writes down her thoughts, convinced that the legendary black-hearted youngest son of the Reinharnated family shouldn't have such a compassionate personality. With a heavy sigh, she suddenly recalls Rick's suspicious presence around the estate. Echidna realizes Rick's recent actions are highly suspect, as he has quietly been gathering followers inside the merchantry. She trails off in silence as she slowly opens a wooden container. Her eyes burn with intensity as she pulls out a concealed weapon. Remembering a bitter argument from her past, Echidna recalls being yelled at for failing to sacrifice everything for the family. She looks up at the massive, imposing family estate that has kept her physically and emotionally isolated. Clenching her fists, she quietly whispers for her mother in the quiet room. Tears stream down her face as the emotional weight of her past continues to shatter her composure. Elsewhere in the academy market, students are advised that high-grade orbs are completely unnecessary for magic class. The students are told they can craft basic items in any empty chemical room as long as they meet the absolute minimum requirements, pointing them toward a cheap shop connected to the Eleanor merchantry. Back on the streets, Nox checks his inventory list, reluctantly admitting to himself that Rick's natural magical talent is absolutely the real deal. Nox reflects that if Rick weren't a corrupted demonic human, he would have gladly recruited him into his personal inner circle. He stands in silence, realizing he must tread carefully around this hidden threat. Suddenly, a dark figure lunges from the shadows, forcing a painful grunt as a surprise blade is narrowly parried. Nox pins his attacker against the stone wall, aggressively demanding to know why the assassin approached him, leaving the attacker acting completely bewildered. Nox delivers a swift strike that forces a painful wheeze, warning his opponent that wasting time in a prolonged street fight will not end in his favor. Realizing he has been caught, the attacker chuckles, stating this will be a highly brief conversation as he gets straight to the point. Setting up a localized soundproof barrier, Rick demands that Nox betray the Reinharnated family to become a loyal servant to the first prince. Nox steps forward with a cold grin, calling out to his attacker with absolute confidence. Nox shatters the assassin's composure by revealing that his true master is not the first prince, but rather a literal demon. Visibly shaken, Rick admits that Nox possesses an incredible amount of secret information, before muttering that his master will not tolerate this. Red magic suddenly flares as Rick warns Nox that his supreme lord will definitely not be pleased with his interference. Demonic energy surges violently around them, signaling that Rick's lord is preparing to exert his influence. Nox calmly cuts through the oppressive red aura, prepared to face whatever supernatural force comes his way. Nox mockingly asks if he truly believes his demonic master Baal will grant his deepest desires, receiving a firm, brainwashed affirmative. Nox simply walks away, coldly stating that he hopes Rick does not live to regret his foolish blind faith. Infuriated, Rick glares at Nox and promises to brutally execute him if he ever dares to insult his family again. Nox dismissively retorts that he will keep that threat in mind, leaving Rick standing alone on the dark streets. The next morning on the academy grounds, students whisper nervously as they spot their bald instructor approaching the class. A senior student humorously warns the others that calling an actually bald instructor bald-headed is extremely disrespectful. Ignoring the hushed whispers, the burly instructor gathers everyone and explains that the day's class will take place on the Claril Plains. The instructor announces they will be learning the absolute basics of horse riding here, ordering the cadets to mount up. Several students begin to panic, complaining about being forced to take a basic equestrian course. Nox ignores the whining and calmly calls out to his dark beast named Carl. While the instructor tells them to mount their steeds, nearby students note that Nox is incredibly proficient at riding. A jealous student gasps as they realize Nox's mount is a highly rare obsidian breed, prompting a smug smirk from the young noble. Nox silently rejoices, knowing that having an elite mount like Carl is one of the massive benefits of his meta-knowledge. Once the instructor sees that the students have finally stabilized on their mounts, he loudly announces the start of the main equestrian race. The class instantly erupts in a wave of protests, with cadets arguing that it is completely unfair to race when some only learn to ride today. One panicked student screams that the race is absolute madness, claiming his assigned beast just actively tried to kick him to death. The loud instructor cuts off their whining, declaring that the rules are incredibly simple and require everyone to ride around a corner in the nearby nameless forest. As the instructor promises extra grade points to the winner, Nox snidely thinks that these rules are about as simple as their teacher's bald head. Nox brushes off a classmate's gaze, mentally preparing himself for a massive script-altering event about to occur during this class. He recalls that this riding exercise is precisely where a dangerous demonic human is scheduled to make his very first appearance. The original timeline dictates that the main protagonist and the cadets are supposed to band together to defeat this demon. Nox worries because the actual main protagonist is completely missing from this class, leaving the future of the academy in complete jeopardy. Resolving to take immediate action, Nox is suddenly interrupted by Penelope, who nervously claims she isn't scared but wants to stay close, just in case. The snide classmate mocks Nox for trying to act like a bodyguard, prompting Nox to coldly tell him to mind his own business and get lost. Penelope looks on as the tension rises right at the starting line. Nox mounts his pitch-black steed, fully aware that the actual equestrian race is the least of their worries today. The instructor bellows for the race to begin, commanding all the students to ride out into the woods. Steeds kick up massive clouds of dirt as the cadets violently surge forward into the lush plains. Noble cadets confidently boast that they will never allow themselves to be outperformed by commoners who just started riding. Suddenly, a violent magical shockwave ripples through the ground, forcing a sharp gasp as Nox commands Carl to hold steady. His high-level mana sensitivity genius skill immediately triggers, completely revealing a massive glowing magic circle hiding right beneath the grass. Bright red runes erupt violently from the earth, threatening to throw everyone from their panic-stricken mounts. As terrified students scream in panic, Nox coolly commands everyone to stay absolutely still, warning that moving during active teleportation magic will end in a horrific death. A blinding flash of light completely engulfs the plains as the teleportation magic resolves. Panicked cadets let out terrified shrieks as they are violently ripped away from their reality. A deafening magical explosion rocks the area, shattering the peace of the quiet woodlands. Far inside, the depths of the forest, the demonic villain Rudger lets out a sinister laugh, declaring that his long-awaited opportunity for bloody revenge has finally arrived. In the newly teleported location, Nox repeats his harsh warning for the terrified students to remain absolutely still if they value their lives. The surrounding space crackles violently with erratic magical current, throwing several cadets to the hard ground. Confused groans echo through the dense fog as the unstable magical field slowly dissipates. One dizzy student rubs his head in pain, demanding to know where they are, as another hysterically points out they were on the plains just seconds ago. Nox looks around grimly as classmates whisper in confusion, wondering if this mass transportation is some kind of surprise exam. Penelope asks Nox for his thoughts, as he silently realizes this unstable magical formula is entirely different from the Dean's. While Nox tries to analyze the situation, an arrogant noble orders Echidna to shut up, reminding her she is not a member of the royal family. Nox coldly dismisses the hot-headed student, turning his focus back to Penelope as they discuss the outside magical interference. As Penelope and Echidna ask for his reasoning, Nox silently mocks the elite students for being completely complacent due to their sheltered, luxurious lives. With a heavy sigh, he reminds himself that they are currently trapped inside the brutal reality of Inner Lunatic, one of the most punishing games ever created. Activating his high-tier acting genius trait, Nox publicly calls out the highly disorganized and unstable formula used to transport them. Seeing him point out the anomaly, several senior cadets reluctantly nod in agreement, admitting the magical circles are indeed strange. An ally asserts that Nox's analysis is spot on, forcing even his fiercest critics to admit the magical framework surrounding them is highly unstable. Penelope quietly wonders if this dangerous magic could have been deployed by her own brother. One cadet warns that lingering in this toxic mana is highly dangerous, while an aggressive noble demands immediate proof before anyone starts taking orders from Nox. Realizing the dire truth, Echidna whispers that Nox was entirely correct, and they are in deep, fatal danger. Suddenly, a terrifying chill sweeps through the forest clearing. Nox draws his sword with blinding speed, demanding if the oblivious cadets can smell the sickening stench of fresh blood in the air. Nox warns that an intermediate rank monster is lurking directly above them, as a massive black shape suddenly drops from the dark canopy. The massive demonic beast smashes into the forest floor with a shattering impact, sending a violent shockwave through the dirt. Steadying his weapon, Nox commandingly tells the terrified students to brace themselves for combat. Nox confidently steps forward as the beast roars, declaring that he is taking absolute command of this battle. The cadets stare in disbelief, muttering that a notorious slacker taking charge of their survival is absolute madness. One elite student realized with intense shock that Nox somehow detected a high-level monster's ambush before anyone else. The students can only watch in confusion, wondering how this supposed failure has suddenly become so incredibly different. Back at the academy training plains, the wind gently rustles through the empty fields. Professor Vernon paces angrily, complaining about how this entire batch of students must be completely talentless, since not a single person has returned from the race. Suddenly, Ross rides in, gasping for breath, desperately shouting that they have massive trouble and demanding to know where the students are. Vernon demands to know what is wrong, only to turn pale as Ross reveals a corrupted demonic magic user has been spotted directly inside the academy grounds. Vernon grumbles that this emergency had to happen exactly when the highly powerful Dean Noah is away from the academy. They ride into the woods and spot Nox's rare black stallion Carl standing completely alone, realizing the students have already been targeted. Reading a frantic magic transmission, Vernon's eyes widen as he learns the demonic human has officially appeared at the entrance of the nameless forest. Vernon urges them to move quickly, but Ross despairingly notes that reaching the nameless forest without teleportation magic will take at least 2 full days. While the professors race toward them, Nox and the cadets sprint through the dense, misty forest to put distance between themselves and the beast. Another massive blast of demonic energy detonates nearby, showering the fleeing cadets in dirt and branches. Echidna reluctantly tries to apologize, but Nox dismisses it, asserting that they have far more pressing issues related to the previous ambush to worry about. Penelope declares that by imperial law, she must take charge of the students, prompting a sigh from Nox as he calls her by her nickname. Nox demands she recite the Imperial Emergency Manual, which states the top priority is always to protect the Imperial family member while giving command to the strongest knight or mage present. Nox points out that she is both the only royal present and a crucial future weapon needed to defeat the demon lords. Her lightning mana and power of punishment are simply too valuable to be risked in a disorganized battlefield brawl. Nox bluntly states that, by Imperial law, even if every other student dies, they are legally required to sacrifice themselves to protect her. Since he was the only one who reacted instantly to the ambush, Nox firmly requests that she officially hand over the supreme authority of the group to him. Nox requests that Penelope give him absolute authority over everyone's lives. He stands tall, demanding supreme field command to guarantee their survival. Classmates stare in shock at his bold request, but a loyal ally happily declares that Nox is the absolute model of a true, heroic knight. Nox looks exasperatedly at his overenthusiastic classmate before taking charge as Penelope gladly yields her leadership position to him. The rest of the class reluctantly falls into line, recognizing the dire nature of their situation. One bitter classmate smiles, whispering that Nox has just committed suicide by taking responsibility, essentially drinking poison from a holy chalice. The classmate mockingly tells Nox to do whatever he wants, but instantly cowers as Nox turns a terrifying cold glare toward him. Nox declares that the matter is officially settled, warning that anyone who fails to follow his direct commands will be heavily punished. With a quiet hum, Nox commands the entire class to tightly follow his lead.